everybody. I'm going to call the February 13th work session order. We're going to go a little bit out of order today because we have some folks here on some agenda items. So we're going to start with the work session. Once we get items 2.12 and 3.1 out of the way, then we'll go back to the CRA. I did ask earlier if there were any citizens to speak at the CRA and had no takers on that. So we'll start with item 2.1.
ADA transition plan presentation.
Good morning, Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Manager Porter. We were fortunate to bring you the conclusions of our ADA assessment. The city had agreed upon doing this assessment about 2.5 years ago. And so we have consultants from Benesch, from Benesch to kind of go over the findings. This is Mrs. Amanda Hegg and Mr. Bryan Weinstein.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So like Sherman said, my name is Amanda. I'm a planner with Benesch. And then with me today is Bryan Weinstein. He's the project manager on the ADA transition plan. And so what is the ADA? Just an overview of what the 1990 law states. It is a civil rights law, much like those from the 60s. However, the ones in the 60s didn't outlaw discrimination based on disability. And so that's when the ADA came into play in 1990. It mandates equal access to facilities with people with disabilities, and it requires all facilities built or modified after 1992 to be accessible. If a person qualified under the ADA cannot access a park or an amenity, it is a ADA complaint and it is a violation of their civil rights. Like I said, the ADA prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities, and that includes programs, activities, and all public facilities and entities. And what are the requirements of public agencies? The first step was, So reasonable modifications under the ADA may include restructuring or altering facilities and programs. It may also must provide reasonable auxiliary aids and services. And auxiliary aids include interpreters, note takers, sign language interpreters, different accessible formats like Braille, that sort of thing. And then it also requires the removal of architectural and communication barriers, which is what our project looked at. And then it also includes designing all new construction to be readily accessible. And that means a portion of the entire facility has to be entered, approached, and be able to be used by people with disabilities. The purpose of our study was to improve access, safety, and security at city buildings, parks, and public rights-of-way. And using all the information we collected during our data collection phase, we developed an ADA assessment and transition plan. And the objectives of these studies was to inventory conditions at all facilities. We also identified and prioritized improvements to address accessibility at all the facilities. We developed a phasing plan based on the data that we collected and how to implement those improvements over time. And we also obtained input from the public on next steps for the transition plan. So in terms of trainings, we conducted 4 trainings in October 2021. We did 4 different sessions, so each session was geared towards a specific segment of your employee population. We did first responders, public facilities and services, trade workers, and right-of-way. And so each training consisted of communication and interaction, how to be respectful of a person with a disability. We also talked about service animal basics, so when someone were to bring a service animal into a rec center, for example, what are the questions that they can ask that person? And then we also talked about the ADA standards, so some of the main things that we saw in the facilities. We brought pictures and showed them what to look for when they're working in the facilities. And then in addition to that, right-of-way had a lot more on the curb ramps and the sidewalk infrastructure and how that can be made accessible. So over the course of our project, we assessed 95 facilities, and that was from August 2020 to January 2023. That also include our data analysis portion. In addition to the facilities, we collected data on 7,845 curb ramps, and that started in October 21 and went to January 2022. And then around the same time period, we also looked at 365 miles of sidewalk. And you can see a map of the City of Clearwater sidewalk infrastructure, and we looked at all 365 miles. This is a list of some of the items that we inventory during our assessments. We look a lot at signage, restrooms. We even take a peek into the employee work areas, look at elevators, playgrounds, drinking fountains, all the routes to the building. We also look at the parking at the building, and the curb ramps, and of course the sidewalks. And those are some images from some of the assessments that we completed on the slide. And examples of some issues that we saw: pay stations not being accessible because of the curb, no tactile signage on doors, pipes not being insulated, and then also paper towel dispensers, toilet paper dispensers. We look at all that, but there's also an image of a paper towel dispenser located above the mirror on the slide. And then next I'll hand it over to Bryan to go over the scoring.
Thanks, Amanda. So my name is Bryan Weinstein, as you mentioned. So after looking at all the different items throughout the entire city, we tried to go and prioritize how we recommend things can be done, because it's not feasible really to go and get everything done all at one point in time. So we looked at a whole bunch of different conditions, such as the age of the building, where this item is located, the severity of the issue. Is it something that's more of an inconvenience that's still not accessible, or is it something that someone's really going to get hurt, or really limits the use of the facility? We also create something called quick fixes, so things that can get done for $500 or less, that really won't take that much time, maybe just putting up a sign or moving a sign that's in the wrong location by a doorway, and try to go and create these high, medium, low, and quick fix categories to go and help city staff go and figure out what the best way to go and mitigate everything is. We also developed estimates of probable cost. We used RS means tables. We talked to city staff and tried to find out how much it costs, in Clearwater going to get some items fixed. We also used some of our data from other local agencies we've done this project for, and then just our general engineering judgment, because some things we just necessarily haven't seen that much of in the past. And it's important to remember that the costs that we have on the next page, they're very broad estimates, and a lot of those costs are going to change depending on how you go and choose to fix things, how many you decide to group together, and what year things are going to be fixed at. But from the entire city inventory, including the sidewalks, the buildings, the curb ramps, we came to about $52 million to go and fix everything. But again, it's important to remember that these items can be completed over time, as long as, according to the DOJ, you slowly chip away at the items. You're not required to go and fix everything today or this year, as long as you put forth resources that you feel are appropriate for your city, and you keep track of what these fixes are. That it can be done in 1 year, it can be done in 50 years. It's really up to you and your changing priorities. And then just because the priorities that we listed on the previous page and the priorities that we have in the report, it's also important to remember too that your priorities as a city may change over time. A building that we looked at that might have issues, if you're going to be knocking it down, renovating it, then there's really no reason to go and fix it today if tomorrow it may not be there, it might be completely gutted. So, again, as you, as a city, go and look at the report and try to figure out what improvements need to be done when and where, it doesn't necessarily have to go and stay consistent over time, as long as you continue to reevaluate that. And so, as I mentioned, the implementation plan is really just a guide, and it's really up to you to determine what that timeline for improvements is going to be. And the transition plan is a living document, so making sure that the improvements are tracked. We've had some agencies that we've done this work for where they have not appropriately tracked the issues, and so then they came back to us a few years later and had us have to redo everything because they weren't sure what has been done, what has not been done, and it's really just been a waste of time and money because of the lack of tracking. But you have good staff here, and they've been trained as to what needs to be looked at, and so I'm sure that won't be a problem. And then, again, the improvements that we listed, there's a lot of times many different ways to go and fix an issue. So just because we listed one particular fix for one particular cost doesn't necessarily mean that is the only way to go and do something. And there's sometimes underlying cost or issues associated with fixing something, because we're really just looking at things just from the way we see it right now. But there could be drainage issues or pipes or electrical problems that might cause something to have to get changed to a different way of fixing it. So really, the next steps, Amanda mentioned that we've already done 4 ADA trainings, and that's fantastic. That's a lot more than a lot of other agencies have had us do in the past. So I think the city's off to a really great start with that. But we really look at things at a specific point in time, and we know that infrastructure changes, whether it's tree roots, uplifting sidewalks, or signs falling off, or a garbage can in a park maybe being moved inadvertently. But little things like that can also go and be the difference between whether or not something's accessible or not accessible. So by making sure that staff continue to be trained and continue to know what to look for and what is accessible and what's not accessible, it's important to make sure that the city remains accessible and continues to become accessible, so that way everything that is modified intentionally or unintentionally is done in an accessible manner. And lastly, we recommend that all future construction also be inspected for ADA compliance. Part of the reason why I have the job is because new infrastructure is not always built in a compliant manner, unfortunately, whether it's from the architects, the engineers, or the contractors. We look at new things as well as old stuff, and there's always issues to one extent or another. And a lot of these things, they may be inconveniences to me as an able-bodied person, but they can really be complete barriers to accessibility to somebody with a disability trying to go in and use that facility. And then one more thing that you can do as a city is also try to maybe create a citizen committee with disabilities to go and make sure that the public really have more of an ongoing voice in this process. Again, we're always going to be here for you. We're based in Tampa, just right across the bay. But then again, we also looked at things only really at one point in time, and just making sure that everybody has a voice, and any sort of accessibility issues that may creep up in the coming years are also really brought to everyone's attention. So with that, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm sure we will. From a benchmarking standpoint versus other cities, how do we look? I mean, this is a big number when you first see it. And obviously it needs to be done over time and will be, but where do we stand relatively?
I think relatively you guys are in a great position. It is a large number, but you are a decent-sized city. You are also more of a newer city compared to a lot of places that we look at, and it's also relatively flat. When we do these studies in older communities, especially historic ones with lots of hills, and there's always a lot more issues. But as I mentioned, we see new infrastructure all the time, not just in Clearwater, but really everywhere that has problems. And so I think that everything we found here is really things that have just been representative of things we found other places. But on the whole, I think you guys are doing great. And you also, as far as I'm aware, you came to us, or you submitted this proposal for an ADA transition plan without any sort of lawsuits or anything really encouraging it, which is also much better than a lot of places that we've encountered.
You said we have time, but what's realistic? I mean, when you threw out 50 years, that seems too long. What is a realistic time frame for eradicating all these issues?
It really depends on your budget and what you have available to you. So I'm hesitant to give a specific number, but some of these problems, if you, like I said, if you plan on renovating a building in 10 years or 5 years or something that's not being used, or you don't plan on having it being used, then there's really no reason to go and fix that soon if you plan on completely renovating it in the future. So 50 years might be too long, maybe 20 years might be more representative of you, but it really depends on what your budget is, and also what your budget's going to be in 5 years and 10 years, because then you could go and compress things or expand it out if that's what's in the city's best interest.
Are there any grants available for some of the fixes?
There are some grants available. That's not something I'm as big of an expert on, but I know that there are grants for different types of fixes, for different types of facilities. We can get with Sherman on some of that too.
Okay. So Sherman, I don't know if this is for you or maybe Jay, but what budget have we set aside, or is it project by project? Come on up to the mic.
Right now, I know the city did have kind of a project budget. I don't know if it was,
The general fund, $300,000 a year to accumulate through the CIP plan right now, so just have to see whether that number needs to increase.
And the overall is 52 million?
Yeah.
So 50 years is not unrealistic, unfortunately. Okay.
If I can add one quick thing too, is that we were told that some of these improvements have already been fixed, not a substantial amount in the whole scheme of things, but the city has been going and making fixes since this project started. We've been handing Sherman, reports. So a lot of these fixes can also go and be fixed, or I'm assuming will be fixed, with just general maintenance of the facilities, not necessarily ADA-specific things.
Yeah, the lion's share is in rights of way, so that's going to be done over time as infrastructure gets replaced. One last thing, why do pipes need to be insulated?
If
I
somebody,
understood the other three, but that one I didn't quite get.
if someone in a wheelchair is trying to go and use a bathroom sink,
Be
for instance,
scalded or,
then, the sharp pipes or the hot water
Okay.
from the pipes can go in and hurt them.
all right. Other questions? Vice Mayor?
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I'm wondering, is the full report, are we going to have access to the full text report? Because this is just a PowerPoint.
yeah, that full report was supposed to have been sent to you guys. If not, I'll make sure that,
Okay, maybe it wasn't attached to my agenda, but anyway. Okay, so as we look at the numbers, and so you have things ranked as high priority, and they equal about $19 million. So I have a couple of questions related to the high priority numbers. Number one, do you have any sense of a timeline for the 19 million in high priorities? About when we should address it, number one. And number two is, are we vulnerable with liability, having been informed of these issues and have them categorized as high, especially related to safety? Should we knock those out pretty quickly?
Any sort of major safety issues that we found, we did make sure to notify the city immediately. So I think a lot of those have already been taken care of, if there were major safety violations. When you see the report, we looked at each building, each facility individually, and we have a separate report for each facility. And in that report, each facility is categorized as high, medium, low for the issues with that one. So depending on how the city decides to go and fix things, if you decide to go and fix all the high priority items, it could end up costing perhaps maybe a little bit more, as opposed to if you decide to fix only the library at one point in time. As an example, I mean, some agencies, they might go and fix all the parking lots in the entire city at once, and there's probably a cost savings with that, as opposed to you fix them on an individual basis. So it really depends on how the city wants to go about and fix them. In terms of liability, the Department of Justice has said that every agency in America that has over, I believe, 50 employees must have an ADA transition plan, and this was back in the 90s. A lot of agencies had one, but they haven't been kept up to date, or a lot of agencies have not had anything at all, and sometimes we're doing the very first one for that agency now in 2020s. So if you have a transition plan, which you guys do now, then you would be covered if there were any sort of Department of Justice inquiry or accessibility lawsuit, because you know what these issues are, and you are attempting to go and fix them. You can't fix them all today, whether you fix them in 5 years or 50 years, as long as you continue to put money forward, whether it's 300,000 or some other number, then you would be protected.
I have a problem with, $300,000 we set aside a year for a $19 million bill for high priority. I mean, if we're going to tell the federal government, well, we're putting money aside and it's, $50 a year, it's money put aside, does it make any difference?
When you put it that way, then probably not. There's also some items, for older buildings, then you have a little bit more leeway in terms of when they get fixed. If you have a building that was built maybe in 1970 or before 1990, before the ADA came into play, there's not a need to go and fix all the issues within that facility because it was built according to the building code prior to the ADA, but once you go and start making modifications to that building, so you renovate the bathroom in a building pre-1990, now that bathroom needs to be made compliant to today's code. Or if you made that renovation back in 1995, it must be made compliant to the 1990 code. If that's not the case, if we looked at something and it was not built in a compliant manner, and this was post-ADA, that's where you'd have more liability from the Department of Justice standpoint. And so those are ones that I think, personally should probably be fixed first, because they were done incorrectly at some point in time.
Okay. On the next step slides, we've got ensure all future construction and renovations are ADA compliant, and not, to be disrespectful, I put like, duh. I mean, why have we not made sure that all of our buildings that we're building now are ADA compliant?
This is something that we've included really.
Yeah,
for all
I
the
mean,
clients.
it's like we should, but do we issue, a certificate of occupancy without doing an ADA? Isn't there a checkbox that says this building is ADA compliant for our own as well as businesses within the city?
You'd probably have to check with your inspection
Planning,
department and see. And the ADA, it's a civil rights law, and depending on how the city and the county treat it, whether or not it's included in the building code inspection process, I'm unsure about. But it is something that we see in.
Let's talk to the source.
Yeah.
Mr. Garriott's coming up.
Okay.
Rather than speculating, I know the answer, but
Hello, Kevin Garriott with the Planning and Development Department and the Building Department. So the question on COs with accessibility comes up. Absolutely not. We don't issue COs unless the building facility is fully compliant. Now, what you've got, this report has been on ADA, which is a federal accessibility law. The Florida Building Code also has accessibility as one of the sections. We enforce the Florida Building Code. If you meet the Florida Building Code, you are going to meet the federal ADA. Florida Building Code has been approved by the federal government as for accessibility requirements. So I would say anything that gets remodeled or anything that gets new would be covered by the Florida Building Code.
thank you, Mr. Garriott.
Certainly.
And then I had a question about, let's see. Oh, we didn't get a clear answer about any grants available for fixes, or not quite sure which grants might be available, but do you think, might there be state as well as federal grants available to help us reach compliance in some examples?
There might be.
Okay,
I-
just don't know about what level of government.
Some things to keep in mind for right-of-way, since I know that's a big chunk of it, is when there are road construction projects, then, that's a lot of times when the right-of-way, the sidewalks, curb ramps will go and be modified then, so a lot of that can be tied into other work, which is sometimes funded by different agencies as well.
Okay. And then on the slide that says implementation plan, the last bullet says completion of each study will ensure the commitment of a future cost. What does that mean?
Well, we created a report for each individual building, and trying to just really say that, as you complete each of these report, all the issues listed with each report, that's going to be a cost with each building.
Okay, but it's our commitment that we will fix these, right? That's what you're saying?
Correct.
Now that we have this study, okay. I just wanted to make sure of that. Okay, I've already answered those questions. Okay. Yeah, there's on the scoring and prioritization, we've got under high, you have new construction built out of compliance. How could that happen?
It's not supposed to happen, but occasionally something will.
Do you have examples that you can, like, in our city, what was new that was built out of compliance?
I mean, it's also a list that these are items that we apply to all different agencies, not specifically City of Clearwater.
Okay. But that's just what would fall into a high.
So I completed all the building assessments, and a few of the things that pop up in the newer buildings is like just the toilet paper dispenser is 2 inches too far from the toilet. So it's easy stuff like that. It's not tearing down a whole restroom and expanding it. It's just small things. Maybe the paper towel dispenser is 49 inches above the floor when it should be 48 inches.
Okay. Real little, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually it's smaller.
Some of those items too, they could have been compliant when the building was built and inspected initially, but then something falls off or a new paper towel dispenser is put up, and now it's put up in a slightly incorrect position, and now all of a sudden something's not compliant. So that's where,
The training.
yeah, the training, making sure that city staff are really aware of what's going on, because it can be compliant today and it's not compliant tomorrow for one reason or another.
Okay. And then I had, I had a question about the assessments, about data was collected for, almost 8,000 curb ramps and 365 miles of sidewalk. And these were just done within a number of months, October to January, February to May. How did you do that so quickly, all those numbers of miles? Is it like a drone thing, or?
So for the facilities, I did all the facilities myself. The curb ramps, we did have temporary employees that assisted. There was a team of 6 of us, so I trained them all. And then we kind of broke the city up into quadrants. So that's how we did that for the curb ramps and the sidewalks. So there were 6
So
of
it's
us.
physically walking all those miles and checking them all out?
Yeah.
Great.
Exactly.
And then this is only on, so if we're looking at this map, this is only on city-owned property, right, public property. Do you assess at all going from a bus stop or public transportation into a business, a mall area, shopping area?
So we assessed the public rights of way if it was on the property or the parcel of the building or like the shopping mall. We didn't go onto the property. We just did the public portion,
Okay,
which would typically be leading to or from a bus stop. So yes.
okay, great. I think that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Albrecht.
As a retired contractor, I was pretty much up to date with all the ADA requirements on all my projects, and just like Kevin was saying, I mean, you wouldn't get a CO unless everything was, they had inspected all of that. Pipe wraps under the sinks on commercial properties, the pitch of the ADA ramps, every 12 feet of flat areas. It was interesting, I took a tour of our new park that we're opening, and so I was actually looking at all that ADA stuff, and it's all there, but it's beautifully designed into the project where it just flows really nice. I noticed that we did have an elevator to get up, in the VIP section, which we went up the stairs, but it was nice to see they had an elevator to do that. Some things I always question, like when we did our lifeguard building on the beach, that we had to put an elevator in there. It was like, well, we don't have any ADA lifeguards, but I guess anybody in ADA, anybody that wants to access the building, you have to make it so they can. On your second slide, you have make reasonable modifications to facilities and services. When I see reasonable, I like to be told exactly. So is that for like an older building where you say, okay, and I'll tell you one of the things that we had issues with, because several years ago, I did do a walkthrough of North Ward Elementary School that the city owns now. And of course, there's no elevators in there, and the staircases, the railings aren't high enough. And so would there be reasonable modifications in a building that is like
100-something years old, that you wouldn't have to require ADA modifications like you would have to on a new building?
So in historic buildings, then there's lots of caveats. So, yeah, that's correct. If you have something that's registered with the state, with the Historic Preservation Society, then you wouldn't have to necessarily go and install an elevator to something like that. But in terms of, like, that wouldn't be reasonable. In some cases, it's not feasible to go and put elevators in. But if you were to have some office, a conference room that's upstairs in a building, like you said, that has stairs that cannot be accessed accessibly, and it's a conference room that we go to on a regular basis as members of the public, having an alternative meeting point in an accessible location would be a reasonable way to modify that service.
So if you couldn't put an elevator, you'd have to put a series of ramps to make it accessible.
Well, it really depends on how the facility is being used. Primarily what we're interested in is if the public can go and access these facilities. There's some things that we look at in terms of staff accessing stuff as well, or I guess we looked at all the staff areas as well, but the ADA, it's primarily looking at the public access. And so if the public is not supposed to be accessing this inaccessible space, and instead that service is in an accessible location, then you wouldn't have to go and put the ramps in this older facility because the public is no longer going to this inaccessible floor.
What if you have an employee, though, that can't access it?
So if you have an employee, so again, newer buildings are supposed to be made 100% accessible. For older buildings, then there's, again, some caveats. So restrooms need to be accessible, employee break areas need to be accessible. If you have an employee that's doing something, trying to go make what a reasonable accommodation, or the ADA says reasonable accommodation, but I know that's not always very definitive. So in some cases, a reasonable accommodation would be that maybe their office is not on the second floor like everyone else's. Maybe they are in another location with other people as well, not segregated from everybody, but their office is in a different location that is an accessible location. Sometimes reasonable accommodation might be that the cubicle wall is slightly larger to accommodate a wheelchair. But a lot of times, like, you'll have maybe a fireman who got injured in the line of duty, and so they can't reasonably perform the duties as a fireman or as a lifeguard, but they still could be employed by the city doing something similar, maybe not similar, but by doing a job in an accessible location, doing office work on some other duty in a location that is accessible to them because they can't go and get up these stairs, because they can't go and fight fires, or they can't become a lifeguard because they're not expected to meet those requirements with the condition the way it is currently. So there are caveats, but not everything needs to be made 100% accessible, I guess is the main thing.
Okay.
Councilmember Shana.
As you can imagine, I was taken aback by that price tag, and frankly, it was overwhelming. So the first question that came into my mind was time frame, because that will impact greatly that number. But maybe it might be naive of me, but I was hoping to get more of an idea of anything that the city is in the process of or has done since that January 22 that can chip away at that. I mean, it might be small, but without a time frame, and a lot of these definitions are not measurable, I just find everything overwhelming.
It is a large number. We have been giving the city reports as we create them. So the past, I guess, 2.5, 3 years.
Categorize that as a high priority. Do you think that's something we really should be doing right away?
I think that's something that would be very beneficial to make sure that citizens are heard and that they have a long-lasting input in this process. So it's something I really do recommend.
Do you have a model, a city that's set one up that does a good job with it at all?
I'd have to go back and kind of think about that.
Okay.
I do know the city of St. Petersburg does have a committee that they do have in place. And so, I have, spoken to their ADA coordinator in regards to, kind of figuring out the framework of how they do their committee. So, I've kind of already kind of done some, some investigating of how we can make ours work. So it's just a matter of just how it fits for the city.
I thought at one time we did actually have an advisory board. Johnny Long was very active with that. Fun gentleman, he's no longer with us, but Ms. Poyer, you had something down?
Yeah, so what I would recommend in terms of next steps is that we will take a look at the report. We'll get together with the various departments that are going to be impacted, to include building and maintenance, engineering, public works, and come up with a recommendation in terms of what we think are things, and legal, and, just a better idea in terms of, because I understand the number's daunting, and especially without the report, it's hard to imagine what that could look like and how we could accomplish that. So that would be our staff's next steps, would be working on that.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Item 2.2.
Authorize purchase orders to 22nd Century Technologies and Cogent Infotech Corporation for citywide staffing services.
We did have one-on-ones on this, so I think many questions will have been answered.
Yes.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Crystal Riles, Human Resources Assistant Director. The item before you today is about citywide staffing services. The city is currently facing an unprecedented hiring and retention problem. To address these challenges, request for proposal 31-22 was issued in August for citywide staffing services. The city received 34 proposals, and a team of city staff representing general services, human resources, public utilities, public works, and parks and recreation departments determined that TSCTI and Cogent Infotech Corporation were the most qualified for the city's needs. It's imperative to have qualified agencies provide staffing services on an as-needed basis to ensure all city departments maintain productivity and to help with critical daily operations. The city currently operates 22 departments, all of which are experiencing staffing shortages, some more critical than others, and may need services throughout the term of these contracts. These contracts may be renewed up to 4 additional one-year terms. All renewals of these contracts will require the approval of City Council, and the funds are available from departments' cost savings from vacant positions. And I'm asking for your authorization, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
So in the, so we have unprecedented hiring and retention challenges. What are we going to be doing at the same time to retain people? We don't want just a revolving door if we're going out to recruit with this service.
Well, we added a training division, right, to HR.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be starting, trainings for the management, because some of, the issues could be the management and why employees leave.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that we're doing. We're trying to recognize more, do more things to recognize the employees with the Achievement Awards Committee, doing more events to recognize the employees, and do different awards.
And we've looked at salary ranges.
Yes, correct. And we're having a job and class study this year as well.
And will that study include different types of incentives like job share or flex time?
It will look at the salaries and the benefits. Yeah.
Okay, only salaries and benefits, okay. Did you contact, so it's listed on there that Cogent, I guess, right, is Cogent Infotech, has been used by Pinellas County?
Yes, that's what they listed on the bid.
So did you reach out at all to Pinellas County to find out how they liked them, how effective they were, how long they needed to have a contract with them to get positions filled? Are they still using them so that we might be competing for positions?
I have not, but I can,
Okay.
and I can get back with you guys.
Okay. Because they say they have a non-exclusive agreement. They can work with any others they choose. And so I was wondering, like right now, who are they working with in our region if we're all trying to fill similar positions?
And I can get.
Okay. And then, again, the same thing, I guess, an average length of time they have a contract with a municipality like ours. And is our type and number of openings typical or particularly challenging?
I think we have about roughly the same. We're like range on the number of openings compared to our comparators, our 13 comparators.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to put this on consent or not? Okay, thank you. 3.1.
Presentation of the business process study of the development review, permitting, and inspections process.
Good afternoon, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. A little over a year ago, we issued an RFP for a business process study of our development review, permitting, and inspections processes. And we wanted a detailed study that would look at all of our internal processes. And we also wanted to know how we stack up against best practices in our industries. And we also wanted to know what our customer thinks. Essentially, we wanted to get a study that kind of gives us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hopefully there is no ugly, but we wanted to hear, what an unbiased party had to say after evaluating our processes. Obviously, we want to know what we're doing well, and we want to know what we need to do to improve to create a fair and predictable development environment, and also have a high level of customer service. So we hired Matrix Consulting. We had, I think, a great response. We had 10 proposals, and Aaron Baggerly from Matrix is here this afternoon to present the findings of the study as well as their recommendations. Before he gets started, I do want to recognize and thank everybody in planning and development, IT, engineering, fire, utilities, solid waste, and parks who participated in this study. And I know that a lot of people always associates planning and development only with the development review process. I think it's important to recognize and thank all those that are in other departments that also support us in what we do. And I think you'll see a lot of their faces here in the council chambers today if you have any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Aaron Baggerly with the Matrix Consulting Group. Excuse me. Excited to present the final report of the Development Review, Permitting, and Inspection Business Process Study. I believe I was able to speak with each of you early on in the process, and excited to wrap this up. And if you have questions, feel free to interrupt while I give a presentation, or we can wait to the end, whichever works best for you. Just an overview of the project that we conducted for the city as a comprehensive evaluation of your current service delivery model, as Gina said, for the development review, permitting, and inspection processes that touch both planning and development and a wide variety of city departments involved in the development process, everything from soup to nuts as part of that. And we interviewed staff, we did a current state assessment of best practices, management, diagnostic assessment. We also did a customer outreach effort for prior customers with a survey and stakeholder focus group meetings. We held several focus group meetings here and at several other libraries throughout the city. And also, as part of our engagement, we did a comprehensive assessment of your workload, your performance measures, your expectations, technology, and ultimately identify the staffing needs associated with the various development review, permitting, and inspection processes. And as you saw in the report, we did a comprehensive analysis with 55 total recommendations to make the streamline the process, to make it more predictable, and to continue to provide a high level of service to the community that is being provided. A couple of the key strengths of the organization. First and foremost, there is a culture of customer service within the city of Clearwater. It is clear that staff focus heavily on that, and there's very strong and robust turnaround times for many of the permit applications that are there. On the building side of things, I think the maximum time period is 10 days. That exceeds best practices in the industry for all types of applications. We'll talk about some challenges with that in a little bit. Technology utilization is very robust within the city. The Acela platform that has been deployed is used very heavily. It's a good program. Staff rely on it heavily, and that technology utilization is one of the highest that we have seen in our history as a company over the last 20 years. There's a fair amount of information that is provided to the public out there on the website, and also in planning and development's suite and informational handouts that are available as well. And also as part of this engagement, since we started this study back last April, several of the recommendations that we had identified as part of this study have already been implemented. The staff have been working on this throughout the last several months and implemented several of the key recommendations that we have made as part of our report. Transitioning to some of the challenges, while you're doing many things well, there are some inherent challenges and always opportunities for improvement related to the development review, permitting, and inspection process. One of the key challenges is with the FLS, FLD, which is really the site approval process on the planning side of things. It's very flexible. It gives a lot of flexibility in the code. It's well written, but it also can create some challenges with some more of the simplistic or less intensive application types that create some of the challenges and maybe prolong an application review for some less intensive permit application types, particularly in certain areas, some corner lots looking at that. As I mentioned earlier, there's a very strong turnaround time for building applications. And quite frankly, sometimes this is too ambitious. With a high workload, it's leading to maybe a less than desirable comprehensive review of applications. And so while you might hit the 10-day turnaround time, which is great, it might not be a thorough review where there's some late hits in the second or third round of review, which really lengthens the whole time of the development process for the applicant from the time they initially submit until that time the permit is actually issued. And we'll make a recommendation related to that where to compress that timeline down here based on more thorough reviews. Low morale is an issue with some of the teams. As the item before me, there are some vacancies in various teams, and that's created some low morale issues that are also corresponding with a peak workload. And so you've got lower staff and highest workload that in historic context of the city of Clearwater, and that's created some challenges. And then while you're utilizing technology very well, some of the systems are not intuitive, and that is both for staff, but also the public, which is trying to upload an application and to receive a permit. There's some good workarounds and saw some creative things that staff are able to do and to really help the customers. You can call Development Services Tech, and they can log in as they can see what the applicant sees and say, hey, you need to click on this here. But it's not as an intuitive platform that it could be. And there's also a lack of training related to both staff on that software platform, but also the public as well, to when there's an update rolled out, FAQ or a training session to help them overcome the new things. As we all know, when iPhone pushes a new update, we all become frustrated with that, and so there's some opportunities to provide better training with the software platform, both internally and externally. To jump into the recommendations, we broke these down into several different areas. The first one that we hit in the report was management and administration. And one of the key things that we determined and made a recommendation on was the need to establish an internal cross-disciplinary working team. And this would include individuals at the managerial or supervisory level for each of the review disciplines to come together, to have a working group to really resolve some of these issues that are maybe there, some of the challenges that have came up in the last few weeks, to work together to really help shepherd the process and continue to build on the recent success. Another area related to this is succession planning. As the HR director said, hey, they started a training unit. Succession planning is one of those ways that you can help retain employees, to create opportunities for staff to grow, continue to learn more things in their position, but also other positions. So there's some back training, but also some career growth opportunities. Another area is to cross-train development review techs. These are the individuals who are your frontline individuals who are taking in the applications, whether in person or digitally, and really processing those building applications. They're primarily focused on the building permitting side of things, and so we made a recommendation to cross-train them to assist the development review and planning side of that, and also look at engineering applications such as right-of-way applications to process those types of applications. Another area that we saw to need was a dedicated floodplain administrator. Floodplain administration, I believe, is spread across 5 different functional groups within the city. And so it's unclear who's really the floodplain administrator and who's the final say on a floodplain related issue. You're on the Gulf and you got a bay, so you got a lot of water around here. That's an important position that we clearly see a need for in the city of Clearwater, and the floodplain administrator should fall under the planning and development department. Another area was to update the development fee schedule. While there's been some modification to that based on construction value increases, and so fees have increased as construction values increase, the department has not adopted a cost recovery model related to development fees, and so we made a recommendation to do a comprehensive study looking at your fee schedule to ensure that you're recuperating the costs that the city and the department wants to recuperate, that your fees cover X percentage of the operating costs of the planning and development department primarily, but also some of those other tangential operations such as fire marshals, engineering, utilities, et cetera, as part of that. Another area was to create more succinct staff reports to board and city council to tighten those up a little bit. There are some very robust reports that were written particularly to the CDB. One I reviewed was, I think, 38 pages, and it has some redundant efforts in there. So to become more efficient and more succinct, and that would be ideal. And then, as we mentioned earlier, develop comprehensive training materials for staff and the public regarding their various roles on the staff side, about the various individuals involved in the development process, and then also some software and technology training materials to provide a better utilization for staff on the software platform itself, and also some additional information out there for the public on the process and how to utilize the technology better. The next area that we looked at was process-oriented, related to the various development review, permitting, and inspection processes for the city. We process mapped, I believe, about 15 different processes within the city. They're at the back end of the report, and a lot of flow charts back there to show that. And so looking at several of the different processes, there was a couple areas, key recommendations. The BPRC, which is a Building Plan Review Committee, is a form of a pre-application meeting that, when it was started many years ago, was a good way for people to come in. Hey, I have this idea. Is it feasible or not? What's the process? How to do that? It needs to transition to more of a formal pre-application process to provide better information to individuals who are looking to develop in the city and provide some meaningful feedback. So some slight modifications to that to improve that process to make it more effective for the public, and also to reduce some of the staff burden on time related to that. Another area is the site approval process, FLS, FLD process, to only accept complete applications. When that process was codified several years ago, it does allow, it's a very defined process, and it works very well. One of the challenges that we saw is applicants can submit incomplete applications, and they have 5 days, I believe. Staff will review it and zip it back and say, hey, you've got 5 days to submit it. Well, a lot of people are submitting incomplete applications based on what we reviewed, and so staff are reviewing an incomplete application, had to return it, and then the public's getting another 5 days. Well, that shortens the time period of staff to really review that, and so they're having to cram a little bit more into a 2-week time period. And so we make the recommendation to only accept complete applications. And by complete applications, I mean mostly complete. They meet the checklist, not missing a whole drainage plan for a commercial development or something like that. If that's out, you got to go to the next cycle. But clearly there's an opportunity to address comments, or if you're missing a minor sheet or something like that, there is some staff discretion there. So to improve that, to give staff a little bit more time instead of cramming everything into a 10 to 15 day period. Shift the certificate of occupancy process oversight from the development services tech to the building division. The DSTs are taking a heavy burden on this and making a lot of decisions that are well above their skill level necessarily, and to transition that to the building division to allow them to have a little more oversight onto that, and then to also incorporate the engineering inspections formally into the building inspection workflow. Some of those inspections are getting called at the last minute, and if you work that into the workflow through the permitting software system, it'll create a more concise and consistent experience and understanding to get those engineering inspectors out there sooner. And then finally, on the process, as we mentioned, you have a very robust community development zoning code, and that was adopted, I believe, about 20 years ago now, and then the US 19 downtown form-based code was adopted a few years ago. And to conduct a comprehensive review of that code, to look into it and see where there might be some modifications related to that. Technology. We live in a very technological world nowadays. And as we mentioned, many of the applications, I believe about 75% of them now, or maybe 80%, are digital online submittals, which is fantastic, going away from a paper-based system. And so there's a need for additional support for the permitting software systems and platforms. And there's been some challenges with that, being a lower priority for the IT department related to that. So we make the recommendation to add one position to the planning and development department that is focusing on the IT permitting software system and be a liaison to the citywide IT department, and to focus on several different areas and to just be an expert on that system and to provide analysis related to that, incorporate new workflows or modify the existing workflows, help create some of that training materials for the staff and to public, to be a resource, internal resource for a development services tech or a planning or a building inspector or engineering inspector to come and say, hey, I have a question here, can you help me with this? To provide greater support internally and also externally when the public calls and say, hey, I can't get this worked out, I think my application's lost, can you help me to work through that and provide some of that training out there for the staff and public. There's separate processes right now for an electronically submitted application and a paper submitted application. And there's two different platforms that are being used because of that, and they should transition to a similar process internally with the same software system, the same approach to both of those. And then also there's a need to transition to digital packets for the Community Development Board, very paper-based now. Transition to a digital packet is recommended to reduce the paper footprint and to make it much more streamlined. And then ultimately link historic development records to the permitting software system. There's some that are linked, more recent ones are linked, but some of the historic records just not that far back are not currently linked to either a parcel number or a permit number or something like that. So staff have to go dig into archives to find some of that historic information when they're doing their due diligence related to a new application. The next area is customer information and engagement, an area that to improve getting that information out there and to get it out there in a consistent and concise manner. There's a need to create a comprehensive development handbook that really outlines the process, what it looks like, everything from a pre-application side to getting a certificate of occupancy. And so creating that comprehensive development handbook, posting that on the website, it's also a resource internally for staff so they can see the various players and functions in that, as long with providing that information to the public to help provide them the tools to develop and submit a complete application. Also, better equip staff to address customers' questions. This is a training opportunity, particularly at the development services tech, to expand their horizons to develop a better understanding of not only their role in the process, but other functional groups such as engineering or inspections or planning and development, utilities, the fire marshal's office, to have that included in their repertoire. So when somebody calls, they're not getting sent to a voicemail box. They're getting an answer immediately there. When somebody calls, they pick up the phone and they can get that answer. The next one is related to the city's website. I know that you did an update middle of last year to the city's website. That provides a much better and greater wealth of information online related to the development process, but there is a need to have a centralized development webpage for all things related, a one-stop shop online, if you may. To have that on there, to have a centralized permits and inspection, development review process webpage, and to provide that development handbook and a wide variety of other information there, to have it all in one spot. And then, as we mentioned before, provide training sessions on the digital application submittal process. And the last slide, just a summary of the staffing recommendations. As we mentioned earlier, there's a need to establish a full-time floodplain administrator position to bring that to a centralized location within planning and development. There's also a need to add one long-range planner to that team to focus on some of the code amendments that are going to come out of the code review and some of the other recommendations that we made in the report, to also focus on special projects and to focus on a wide variety of different text amendments, code amendments, those types of things, and special projects for the long-range planning team. There's a need to add one building inspector position internally, or you could contract that out to give you some flexibility with the workload fluctuations, and that will help ensure a more balanced inspection workload for each of the building inspectors, to prevent them from having to drive all over town, and to be a little more precise, and to continue to provide those next day inspections that are there. And as we mentioned, add an IT business analyst in the planning and development department to focus on the permitting software system and to provide internal support to the power users of that software platform. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Thank you very much. This has been a long time coming, and I thought we got started on this a couple of years ago and COVID hit, got delayed. So I have a few questions. I liked your presentation. you went through it very quickly, but a lot of the things I made some notes on that I wanted to make sure that I understood. Let me ask you this, were you hired by Pinellas County to do their assessment?
No, we're not hired by Pinellas County.
Okay. Because I didn't know when we put it out, I thought one of the companies that they were looking at did Pinellas County's assessment. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that you looked at. Looked like you did from what was presented today. Just a couple of notes. The Acela software is not customer friendly. It's not intuitive. Now, I've used it for years and I still have a hard time. I'm retired now, but I'm helping my son do some work at his house. He pulled a permit, but I'm kind of overseeing things, and I still pull my hair out with that thing. If they could somehow make it a little easier, like the new website we have for the city, got big buttons in there. You go right to agendas and you're there. Acela, you got to hunt all around for things. And I've talked to Gina in the planning department about that. I think it could be better. And I like your idea of hiring a position that can modify that and keep up.
And sorry to interrupt, but I think there's a need for some training materials out there, some screenshots of how to do that. And we made that recommendation to help guide the applicants to make it a little more intuitive, even though it's a little clunky at times.
I like your idea about doing a website for development, because if somebody wants to do something, they're going to be doing developing in Clearwater. It's a big thing. I mean, that's not just a little project. I mean, they're going to go through a long process, and depending if it's FLD, FLS, how long that's going to be. Years ago, I pulled permits in a lot of places around the state, and and I'm talking about probably 15 years ago, City of Largo had a really neat building department. They had monitors in their waiting room. So you go in to do a permit, and the monitors, they had videos on them. Are you doing this? And you could look how to do what the process, where you're going to go. You're going to go to zoning, and then you're going to go to building, and then you're going to, they lay it out for you while you're sitting there instead of reading a magazine or watching the news. Learn something about how their processes are. And I used to amaze me that every place that I went, and I went to a lot of municipalities pulling permits, everybody thought that they were doing it exactly like everybody else, and everybody's completely different than everybody else. And they expect you to, what do you mean you don't know how to do this? Well, so I just would when I'd go in, I'd say, how do you do this? So I know what I'm doing, and I just come out and ask them, and they were real friendly when you say it that way. But I know that every place is different, and when we have contractors come into Clearwater, we do things a little different here too. So training and videos now are commonplace. I mean, you go to YouTube, you can learn anything. And that you can post videos on YouTube, you can play them, and people get online before they come down and watch it and see what they're in store for. So I think that's a great idea. The BPRC, I'm glad that they're going to be you're looked into some things where they can tweak that. It's a good thing. I tell people that want to come in with a project, go to a BPRC, because they're going to tell you up front, and you don't have to have an expensive set of plans. You can bring a piece of paper with a drawing on it. Say, here's what I want to do, and then you'll get input from all the department heads, which is great. I'm not going to take up any more time here. I could probably talk for an hour on things. But it looks like you touched on a lot of things. I'm happy with that, and I think we've got some decisions to make on what we want to do to help out our building department. We have a great department, by the way. I never thought we didn't. I just knew there was a lot of processes that could be done better, and that's all I wanted to do was help flesh that out. So, thanks.
Councilmember Teixeira.
First of all, I want to thank you. It's long overdue. It's certainly one of the things that was a hot button in my campaign. I had a lot of people who wanted me to address this, and having this done so early on is fantastic. I do find it a little bit interesting that under your key challenges, and perhaps, and I understand that the squeaky wheel gets the grease and all that, but my experience would suggest that one of the key challenges would be the negative perception that needs to be addressed. Because whether or not I only get the negative feedback, right, the perception's still there. So I would have thought that that would be one of your key challenges. Because when, in the various roles I've had, or even now as a councilwoman or during the campaign, it's this constant negative perception of the process. And I want to say that. It's the process, not the staff. However, your recommendations for your customer engagement, I think would be an effective way to solve some of that. But again, I'm a little bit surprised that the perception was not identified as a challenge. Because I know my interview, I was very explicit on examples where the process was broken down. And I don't think it was conveyed, or at least I don't feel it was.
I think you bring up a good point on the perception. I mean, that is, we do this across the country, and oftentimes we're hired when there are challenges, and there is a perception, whether real or unfounded, that there's something wrong with the city. It's a regulatory environment, and so that does pose some challenges and different challenges, because many individuals that are new to the development world don't understand that building and planning is a regulatory agency and have, and academia, police power similar to law enforcement would have. And so I think that's a very good point, and the negative perception, and quite frankly, I don't believe we have addressed really that specifically in that. So I want to talk with our team to figure out how to do that, because I think you bring up a very good important point. How do you change the customer's perception of what is there? I mean, like you said, staff are doing a great job. It's very customer service oriented. And how do you change that narrative within the community that the city's not the big bad wolf? It's here to help you. We have good teams. As Councilor Albright was talking about doing work in different communities, the biggest thing when we meet with stakeholders, well, if I go over here to Largo, it's a much better process, or Pinellas County, it's much different. I've seen that, and I've had people, we've done a community side by side, and they come in and say, this one's much better. Then when I do that one, they say, this one's much better. I'm like, can't say that.
I've had that same experience where different businesses or builders are doing projects simultaneously between St. Pete and Clearwater, and 9 out of 10 say that the process in St. Pete is much faster and easier to understand and navigate. So the perception's there, whether it's real or not, and I really do want to have that addressed, because I think it has a negative impact on attracting new businesses or maintaining them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something we can look at.
Thank you.
I think that goes back, though, to recency bias. I mean, if somebody has a good experience, easy project, it sails through, that planning department's great. Something's more extravagant, intricate, and they have a problem. I think it is perception more than reality. I really think we have a pretty good department that does a good job. Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, well, just to follow up on that is, as Councilmember Teixeira said, perception is that it takes longer. I would go back to, also as part of the report, is that the staff doesn't feel supported by city leadership, including us, and feel that we're critical or we're not supporting them. And I would say, I found that troubling. I want staff to know I fully support them and value their work. And I think a big, part of what you've articulated here is that we need more full-time employees in that department to do the work, to take off the stress. No wonder they don't feel supported. They don't have adequate staffing to get the work done, and to get the work done correctly, to eliminate lengthening out things that you might have missed along the way. So I fully support fully staffing every single department in the city to do the important work of the city. So that's on the record. I'm also supportive of different types of incentives that can recruit and retain employees in our city. And, that's for another discussion. But I would say a part of your recommendations that struck me as wow, really? Is, we need to properly train employees. We need to have a succession plan for each employee. We need to look at fee schedules so they are covering the required expenses. And we only accept complete applications. I mean, those things are like, well, yeah. I mean, isn't that like best business practices? We should be doing that. And so, maybe we have, as we sit up here, as I feel like, best governmental practices and kind of oversight is, do we look at fee schedules every year or every other year to make sure that they're where they need to be in every single department, right? Do we have a succession plan, proper onboarding in every single department? And so, that's perhaps part of our job up here is to make sure we do that. When we get through your report on the summary of recommendations, you've got priorities, and then you've got a timeline. And, I have some questions about some of the timelines. Well, first of all, you've got a high, which would be the second quarter of this year, is to create and implement a unifying mission for all development and permitting functions and seek buy-in to this mission from elected officials and city management. So you think that's going to be done by June? Is that right? We think we can get that done by the second quarter or so of 2023?
That would be correct.
Okay.
The timeline that is included in there is the end of whatever quarter that is for substantial completion of that recommendation.
Okay, good. We've got, in conjunction with making progress or process changes outlined in Chapter 3, consider lengthening timelines for review while emphasizing the need for a thorough review within that time frame. Again, we've got to have the proper staff to do the job at whatever time it takes to do a good job, hopefully perfect job. You've got that at quarter 4 for 2023. But, I would say you've also stated that we have our 10 days exceeds industry best practices level. I mean, why would we have a time frame that exceeds the best practices and puts our employees under such stress? And can't we just change that now? Or is it on printed contracts or?
I'm not sure if that one is adopted in code. Since it is a building permit one, I don't necessarily believe it is. I know some of the FLS, FLD site plan approval process is code, and that would require a code change. And so I know that's a lengthier process. But also, I think the Q4 was to allow time to get ramp up your staffing, to get that staffing in place to do that, and understanding that there is a backlog of work now. You're probably close to all-time peak right now. Staff are under a lot of stress, and you've got a couple of vacancies. I think with, at least on the building plan review and building, there's internal resources, but contractor resources, but you're struggling in other disciplines outside of that where there's maybe not readily available engineering assistants, planning assistants to do that.
Okay. On like number 13, you have staff reports to boards or city council should be more succinct and focus on addressing the critical elements so the body can make informed decisions. And it's high for second quarter of this year. So how might that look differently to us right now? Are we not getting, the best information succinctly to make informed decisions?
You're getting great information. Many of the reports that we reviewed were very lengthy, and there was a lot of redundancy in those reports. And so the succinct side is really what needs to happen. When you repeat something 2, 3, maybe 4 times in a 20, 30, 40-page staff report, depending on the length of that, that is challenging. It requires more time. We could be more succinct in those staff reports. And while I don't recommend this, when I was a planning and development director, we had 1-page staff reports. That didn't provide any information to an elected or appointed body to make a decision very well. And so you got to find that balance of not repeating yourself, but providing a wealth of information that the appointed or elected body can see the application, understand it. The public can also see that application, understand what's being proposed at First and Main Street or whatever it might be. So you're getting robust information. It's tightening it up a little bit so staff are not spending as much time on that, to be more streamlined in their process, to provide still a quality report, but one that is more concise.
Okay. When we talk about the fees so that they're covering the required expenses, you've got that on medium priority and not until the fourth quarter of next year to increase those to maybe, probably increase that fee schedule. Why is that pushed out so far?
Typically, a fee schedule takes 6 to 9 months to complete when you start going into a detailed fee schedule of that. And so that is also a costly endeavor. So I put it that far out to get that in next year's budget.
Okay,
And then also time for procurement process, 2 or 3 months with that, to select an individual, and then have that 6, 7, 8 months to complete that fee schedule by the end of next year.
you have charge re-inspection fees in cases where the project was clearly not ready for the inspection. So that's high priority, second quarter of this year. So I would just anticipate maybe, how do we communicate or define clearly not ready for the inspection? Because somebody's going to say, well, I was ready, I just didn't know.
I think when it comes to that, I mean, it's used at the very discretion of each building inspector now. And so our understanding is there's policy is in place. It is applied when it needs to, or somebody's a repeat offender. And it's really at the sole discretion of each individual. Hey, I'm calling in for a rough end plumbing tomorrow, Tuesday. Well, Tuesday shows up, plumbing inspector rolls in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The rough end plumbing inspection cannot be completed, but you called it in yesterday and they came at the end of the day. That's a clear indication they're not ready. And so you could apply that at that point. Now, if they showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30, or the inspection started real early sometimes, 6:30 or 7, then, you probably wouldn't apply that because they haven't maybe got it completed, or they don't have the water standing test completed at that time, just because you showed up first thing.
Do we already have that, a re-inspection fee? Okay. Do we charge it as much as we should, do you think, or?
We didn't look at the data related to that. Our understanding is that it's at the discretion of the building inspector, and they do apply it in egregious situations, but it's maybe not consistent across the board.
That's all for right now, I guess.
The Acela software system, is there something better out there?
That I'm agnostic on. We don't.
I know that's subjective.
Yeah,
but
I think any software system is like any type of vehicle that an individual buys. Does it have the functionality and the features that you want? And how do you implement that? Acela, I will say, is one of the top 3 in the number of users that are out there. There are 2 or 3 other major users that are in the same boat as Acela. You've gone all in on Acela over the last decade, I believe. It's a platform. It has its inherent flaws, just like the other ones that are out there, and you have utilized it very well. But there's some opportunities to continue to critique that, change that user interface out there to do that. So it's really about how you implement it and the type of training your staff is provided on it, and what resources you provide to the public.
I think most of the questions have been asked, but the one that hasn't is, Ms. Clayton, what do you think, or Mr. Garriott, on the recommendations, and do you agree with the assessment and the priorities?
I would say that I agree with a significant amount of the recommendations. I think that when we had this study done, we were under extreme pressure and lacked staff. And I feel that a lot of, things maybe came out because we were understaffed and under extreme pressure that maybe, and from my perspective, didn't paint the typical picture, but I recognized the place where everyone was at the time the study took place. I think there's some internal disagreements about a few of the things, and we have not vetted all of those amongst all the managers involved in the process.
So how are we going to resolve those?
Well, we're going to sit down and fight it out. No, we're going to, we're going to talk about.
Tell me who wins.
Well, it's going to be a collaborative process, and I think who needs to win in the end are our customers, and so we have to, figure out, balance the staff issues with the customer and process issues. I think they did a thorough study. I think they did a good study. They looked at all the things that we asked them to. I think that they were, pretty fair in that assessment. I don't know, I'd like Aaron's feedback on if he thought he got enough customer input. I know that when we had focus groups, a lot of people that were invited maybe didn't show up. I would have liked to seen a little more customer input, but you saw the results, at least what we had in this study, so.
Did we follow up as to why they didn't show up? Because normally they all want an opportunity to point out flaws.
We did not officially follow up with those individuals who did not show up or who did not complete the survey. When the survey was sent out, we sent 2 or 3 reminders over a 3-week period to get their input. I mean, practically we're spamming your customers to respond to a survey on behalf of the city and us as consultants. And then we randomly selected, and I believe we invited 500 individuals to the various focus group meetings that we had. And I think we had a fairly good attendance to that. It's hit or miss on the number of individuals that we have that come to those types of meetings, but once again, we're asking them to come on their time. The individuals who did show up were very passionate and shared the good and the bad about working with the City of Clearwater.
But you had a reasonable sample size.
That's correct. We don't do a statistical ballot survey in our approach.
I understand that.
But I don't recall what the percentage was here, but it was not exceedingly low or exceedingly high.
Okay.
I think it was more average.
We'll have to have the list of the ones that were invited and didn't show up, so if they email us, then I can say you had your opportunity and you didn't take it.
I understand that.
Okay, Mr. Garriott, did you have something to add?
No, I think they covered things pretty well. I think they did a fair job of separating out the site plan approval process from the building construction permit process. They are 2 totally separate. You need to do one before you do the other on big developments. And I know a lot of complaints that we do get don't really distinguish between the two. Where's the problem? What is the issue? The land development code is unique to Clearwater. Of course, that's going to be, you do anything unique, it's going to be a learning process because it's not the same everywhere. Building code is pretty much the same throughout the state of Florida. The books are the same. There's very, very few Pinellas County local amendments. So I think that was pointed out in the report, and I think that is important. Otherwise, I would tend to agree with them.
Well, the devil's going to be in the details as far as implementation, so I look forward to hearing more about that, what you agreed upon, and some of the things you still have to hash out internally. Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, that stakeholder focus group, when you talked about individuals, were any members of like a residents group or just neighborhoods invited to participate in that as stakeholders?
The focus group, stakeholder meetings, and the survey went out to individuals who had interacted or applied for a permit in the city over the last 3 years.
Okay.
So it did not go out to resident groups. We send those stakeholder surveys and meeting invites out to individuals who know about the process. And so this RFP and this task plan did not include a meeting with general community members or resident groups.
But we do have some community groups that know about the process a bit, but okay, just wanted to know that. Thanks.
We were looking for more of the recent experienced customers who had gone through it.
All right, anything else? Okay. We're going to recess the work session. We're also going to take a 10-minute recess before we dive into CRA. will call the Community Redevelopment Agency for February 13th to order. I would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the January 9th, 2023 meeting.
Move to approve the minutes?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. This time I'll open it up to citizens to be heard for items not on the CRA agenda.
Good afternoon, Lisa Lanza. I just wanted to get some clarification on the responsibilities of the liaisons to the Downtown Development Board, and I don't know if that's something that the CRA, whether the CRA, what do you call yourself, a board? CRA Commission?
For the CRA trustees.
Trustees. Is that something that you regulate, the role and responsibilities of the liaisons? But I know you don't answer questions, but, well, my question is that during the last DDB meeting, one of the liaisons I got the impression, and I could be wrong, that she was advocating to give, that the Downtown Development Board give this money to the Jazz Holiday. And again, double check everything I say, but I thought it came out, I thought 30% of the budget, allocated budget for special events, there was a vote to give to the Jazz Holiday Foundation. And one of the liaisons from the city, I felt that she was lobbying for that, and I don't know if a liaison is supposed to be doing that. So I did send an email to the city attorney about it, and it was a concern. Thank you.
I don't know if we're calling the liaisons the ex officios or the staff that works with the DDB. I wasn't at the DDB meeting. Can any of you?
I will say
enlighten us?
that the staff, the CRA staff's recommendation to DDB was within their policy, which was just established last month, which was $10,000, no more than that. That is what we recommended, again, within a DDB policy.
Okay, thank you. You have something to add?
Yeah. Ms. Lanz is referring to me.
Ah.
I'm not a liaison, I'm ex officio, and the Jazz Holiday came and spoke before everyone, and I wanted to contribute to the conversation, and I had great things to talk about this organization that's been part of our history for over 40 years. I did not suggest a number, I just expressed my opinion. But Mr. Margolis, if you can, was that within my...
I don't see anything wrong with this at all. So I'm not aware of anything from the city side, from an ethics standpoint or otherwise. I did advise Ms. Lanza that she could reach out to DDB's attorney in case DDB has some sort of rules relating to advocacy or lobbying, whatever she wants to call it, in front of that board. But certainly from the city's standpoint, as far as state law, as far as ethics, I don't see any problem at all. And as I've had to tell Ms. Lanza at times on more than one occasion, I'm here to give legal advice to the council, not to the public. And so it's very awkward when members of the public start asking me for input about council members. I'm here to advise each of you. As all of you know, if there's ever any questions or concerns, I'm always happy to give advice one-on-one. Or if asked, I will do so in public. But in most cases, I'm really only here to give advice to you guys. And so to answer Councilmember Cheda's question, I don't see anything at all wrong based on the circumstances that were explained to me.
Well, now that I know what we're defining as a liaison, I mean, the ex officios have always been there, A, to give information to the DDB, to be a bridge between the city and the DDB, and also to give opinions. We just, as an ex officio, I've been on and off over the years, you just don't get to vote. So, okay. New business, item 4.1.
Amend the loan agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the property of 940 3 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to September 1st, 2023 for building improvements to implement the CRA food and drink grant program and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same.
Good afternoon, trustees. Howard Smith, Business Assistant Administrator for the CRA. At the October 29th, 2018 Community Redevelopment Agency meeting, the CRA trustees approved a limited time grant agreement for the property owners to support the establishment of a new food and drink business that are open nights and weekends in the downtown core and the Prospect Lake District area in the CRA. Under the program, the property owners must commit at a minimum to matching CRA's grant funding dollar amount for building improvements that will be maintained for a minimum of 5 years. The owner must also maintain a lease with a business that serves food and drinks on nights and weekends for a minimum of 5 years. On February 18, 2020, the CRA trustees determined that the applicant's proposal met the program requirements and approved the loan and grant agreement in the amount of $187,632.50 for 949 Cleveland Street LLC to build a vacant storefront and establish a coffee and dessert shop that will serve hot and cold drinks along with a wide selection of desserts. The total project cost was $375,265. The applicant planned to complete the construction by February 18th of 2021, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic, construction was delayed. The CRA trustees approved an extension to March 1st of 2022. And then on February 14th of 2022, the CRA trustees approved the second extension to March 1st of 2023 due to the continued effects of COVID-19 pandemic delaying progress, as well as the applicant not being able to secure a general contractor until late 2021. They received the building permit and are nearing the construction completion. The space requires a roof replacement, including structurally engineered drawings permitting procurement and the subsequent installation. Furthermore, the materials needed are expected to be received in the next few weeks, allowing construction to be completed on the roof by the end of April. Upon completion, the HVAC system installed along with fixtures, equipment, and finishes. Separate from the construction, the space originally intended for a cafe being modified to a restaurant to ensure the meeting intent of the space, with the requirements of being open from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. The results in required permit modification before the final build-out. As such, the applicant is not able to meet the March 1st, 2023 deadline. They requested a third amendment to the extended grant agreement to the end of the current year to complete the project and open a new business. Staff recommends amending the grant for 6 months to allow the new completion date of September 1st, 2023. This site is critical to serving the existing residents and attracting residents to the apartment developments in this area, and in turn generating a favorable market to encourage new housing developments in the downtown core. It will also fill the persistently vacant site on Cleveland Street. The original grant agreement incorporates the property's owner full application and the financial documents to secure the loan and grant agreement over a 5-year period, and this document will remain unchanged. And I would be happy to answer any question you have, as well as I have the Envision staff here for Brittany Everly, the development manager, and Skylar Kidwell, the development coordinator.
Questions? Vice Mayor.
I have a question about two things. One thing that you said that was written in the legislative text is that part of the delays is they're changing the cafe to a restaurant to meet the requirement to have nighttime hours. Is that my understanding?
Well, when the original grant agreement was written, it was written for a specific use, and the hours were basically to have a restaurant that will operate from 5 to 10 p.m. starting on Wednesday going into Sunday. So that was always the original text within the original agreement.
Well, the way you read it, it sounded like they had originally planned for a cafe that might not have operated into the evening, but I mean, they knew that it was evening hours requirement from the very beginning, right?
Correct. And there's 3 different shops that's within this agreement, and there's 3 separate agreements. So one would be a coffee shop, the other one was a market cafe type restaurant, and the other one was like a wine and beer bar.
Okay. And then the other thing, and all of them, not all of them need to be open until 10 PM, like the coffee shop might not be or something, right?
That's a good question. Let me find out more
Okay.
with you regarding that one.
I can elaborate a little
Okay.
bit. So,
State your name.
Brittany Eveler, Development Manager for Envision Development. So the original use of the cafe, which is the 943 Cleveland Street address that you see here, is a separate, in a separate building from what we're calling the marketplace, which is the other two addresses that will be presented. The original intention was for that to be a cafe space because the other market area would have more of an afternoon and evening feeling to it, but with the requirement to have the 5 to 10 p.m. use, we decided to change the use to an alternate vendor. That does not mean that that was the reason for our request. The main reason for the request is because there are structural issues that have to be resolved before we can finish the build out for safety issues.
And then the other question I had was, when I toured your development, I think it was last year, or maybe a little over a year, you didn't have the floor poured yet or anything, but there were concrete steps going up from one level to another, kind of wide steps. And I remember asking, is there an indoor ramp for ADA? So you do have an indoor ramp? Okay, great.
Yes.
Because
That was approved and permitted with the original building permits, which was done with the original building when that opened years prior.
Okay, so all those, the restaurant area, because when I took that tour, it didn't look like it had been, what do you call it, when you build it in, you kind of frame it in or whatever, where it's going to go, formed it.
So
And because I was told it was going to be outside, that people in a wheelchair would have to go outside onto a deck and then enter in another door to access the different levels.
It is inside.
It is inside?
In an air-conditioned area,
Right.
and it's not exposed to the elements.
Fantastic, thanks.
It's on the north side, right, of the steps?
It's actually, so the north side would be the sidewalk, so it's on the south side of where the marketplace is where, if, I'm happy to show it up on a plan and send it to you guys if you'd like to see it.
Other questions?
I just have
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not on social media that much anymore, but I have seen some misperceptions and, I guess, some posts saying that the CRA is funding all the repairs of the outside walls. So I want to have that opportunity to clarify that on record, because it is being circulated in social media.
Okay. So our funding for the food and drink grant go to permanent improvements that remain with the structure. And so as far as any of the exterior improvement for what's happening to the building itself, this area is not funding that.
Thank you.
So they're asking until the end of the year that this be extended. We're recommending 6 months. Why the discrepancy? I don't want this coming back again. If this comes back again, I'm going to deny it. At least I'm not going to vote for it. So, do we want to go till the end of the year and give a little more leeway, or do we want to do the 6 months? And do you believe you're going to be done in 6 months? Because I think we've made a commitment here. This is a very unfortunate set of circumstances from the builder who was frankly suspect to begin with on this site. But I don't want to amend this agreement again.
I totally understand where you're coming from. I don't want to be here asking
I'm
for
sure.
an extension. We want this open just as much, if not more, than you guys want it open and the community wants it opened. The only reason that we're asking for the extension for this particular property is because there are structural issues that were a result of the previous builder. That is not something that we would have known when we presented last time. We had to get up, and when we started installing the HVAC in that area, we discovered these issues and we had to pause, and nobody else was allowed in that space until this was repaired. Unfortunately, it's taking a little longer than we had hoped and anticipated for the repairs to come. They are underway, and we do believe that they will be complete at the time that we said, which was the end of April. And so I have, no reason to believe that it will go past the end of the year, which is why we made that request.
But can you get it done in 6 months?
Yeah, but if you just said the end of the
I
year,
requested
maybe.
9 months, because I think we need 9 months.
So where's the disconnect on the agenda item between what they're requesting and what we're recommending?
Well, from the CRA standpoint, and I can go back to discussions with Jay's predecessor with Amanda, our recommendation was always going to be 6 months. We communicated that information to the Envision team when they came back to us in 2021 to be able to ask for an extension. And in my communication with Skylar, which was, I want to say the latter part of November, and I wasn't privy to any other communication since then because the previous assistant director was, but our recommendation was only to address the one issue for the one building, which was the coffee shop, which was my understanding of what was needed for the structural repair. And so we've been pretty consistent in our communication, and we think that the 6 months is a allowable time frame based off the fact that we entered into this agreement in 2018.
Oh, I don't disagree with when the agreement was entered into, but I just assume keep them consistent, and I just assume move it to the end of the year so that we're not going to revisit this again. And make it very clear that if it's not done at that point, then we're not going to be
I'm sure they want,
funding.
I'm sure they want to get finished and get out of there as much as we want to get them finished, so.
And we do value the relationship as far as the public and private relationship to be able to get this done, and we do take direction from you as our trustees. So we serve with pleasure.
Anyone from the public to speak to item 4.1? Do I have a motion?
Well, do you want me to make it a motion to approve agenda item 4.1 and change?
And amend it to the end of the year?
To the end of the year.
That's what I would prefer.
I
but
think that's fair, especially if they're asking for 9 months. you know.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
Yes.
Do I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
Amend the loan agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the property at 1011 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to September 1st, 2023 for building improvements, to implement the CRA food and drink program and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same.
Okay, so at the October 29, 2018 Community Redevelopment Agency meeting, the CRA trustees approved a time limit grant program for the property owners to support the establishment of a new food and drink business that are open on nights and weekends in the downtown core and Prospect Lake District area in the CRA. Under the program, the property owners must commit at a minimum to matching the CRA grant funding dollar for dollar for building improvements that will be maintained for a minimum of 5 years. The owners must also maintain a lease with a business that serves food and drinks on nights and weekends for a minimum of 5 years. On February 18th of 2020, the CRA trustees determined that the applicant's proposal met the program requirements and approved a loan to grant agreement in the amount of $250,000 for 949 Cleveland LLC to build out a vacant storefront and establish a self-serve beer and wine bar with the indoor and outdoor lounge areas. The total project cost was $610,438, and the applicant planned to complete the construction by February 18th of 2021. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, construction was delayed. The CRA trustees approved an extension to March 1st of 2022. On February 14, 2022, the CRA trustees approved the second extension to the March 1st, 2023, due to the continuing effects of COVID-19 pandemic delay in progress, as well as the building permits and as well as the applicant not being able to secure a general contractor until late 2021. They received the building permit and now and are nearing construction completion. Due to the supply chain issues related to the permanent power and the ability to complete the certain timeline items related to finishing of the space until the air conditioner went live, they were not able to meet the March 1st, 2023 deadline. They have requested a third amendment to extend the grant agreement to the end of the current year to complete the project and open a new business. Staff recommends amending the grant to allow the new completion date of September 1st, 2023. This site, again, is critical to serving the existing residents and attracting new businesses to the apartment developments in this area. And also, generating a favorable market to encourage new housing developments in the downtown core. It will also fill a persistently vacant site on Cleveland Street. The original grant agreement incorporates the property owner's full application and the final documents to secure the loan and grant agreement over a 5-year period. And these documents will remain unchanged.
Any questions? Do you have the same request?
I do have the same request, that was to the end of the year on this, property, and for 1017 to 1029, which will be the next one. The issues that were spoken about were to permanent power. We were supposed to have permanent power Q1 of 2022. We did not get permanent power until Q1 of 2023. That is the major issue that we had. Electrical, as I'm sure you guys know, has been a major disruption to not only this project, but every project that we've had. And unfortunately, we just got caught in the midst of it. We did try to push and move forward with as much scope as we can and could have, and we did make a lot of progress, but we were only allowed to go so far before we had to stop and wait for air conditioning. Thank you.
Any questions?
I think we should just be consistent and not break it up into piecemeal.
What I said earlier, so that's how I feel. Anyone from the public to speak to item 4.2? Do I have a motion?
I just have a question of understanding. So, you know, we sit here as trustees, and so a developer's representative has come and asked for an extension because of HVAC problems, and, you know, you don't have the HVAC working, so internal things can't happen or whatever. So I'm not out there. I don't do construction and make judgments. But if you're asking for a year, I just want to understand why we're not giving a year. I mean, is it to put a little more pressure so things get finished quicker? Or, you know, I just don't understand what that disconnect is there.
Well, I can't speak to that. Again, I have to go back to the previous system I worked in, that was communication. And this isn't shifting and blame, but those staff reports were written by him, so I'm not sure what his communication was between him and Vision. But I know as far as the communication that Amanda had for her state predecessor, it was always consistent within 6 months. So at the end of the day, again, we follow the direction of the trustees.
Dr. Matthews?
Additionally, when watching previous cases similar, 6 months is what the trustees had, I guess, historically asked for. So being in alignment with that, as well as reading past communications and emails, that's why I personally asked the staff to recommend 6 months in a presentation, and I did communicate that as well. So just to go on what was previously asked here, I've seen grantees come for a year, and you want to shorten it to 6 months because it's been extended for so long. My understanding, this is a 2-year project that's now in a 5-year project. So as a part of, and I will speak to this later in my report, as a part of, I guess, auditing not just our grants programs, but our applications and our applicants, I just thought I'd be consistent with what you previously asked for and suggested as a board or our trustees, and also going on my predecessor's direct emails and communications, which I have access to.
And that's good reasoning. Again, I don't want this coming back. And I think this is a reasonable window. And I think you're on notice that this is pretty much it, at least as far as I'm concerned. Councilmember Albright.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just say that it wasn't like some of our other applicants that are just dragging their feet for one reason or another. It wasn't their issue. I mean, it was something that was an issue of the building that they were in that had knocked them back, I think. And so that's where I look at now. Let's go ahead and, I know they want to get done as quick as they can. If I was the contractor there, I wouldn't be dragging my feet because I know they want to get out of there. So I'm fine with giving them to the end of the year. I don't think they'll need it, but as the mayor said, we don't want to see it coming back, so.
Well, and I think it's time is money, right? I mean, every time, any day you don't have feet in the door and the business is open, you're losing potential money. But the other thing is, do you ask for like some email documentation or things that prove that what she's saying is, accurate? Or, I mean, I would trust, but I mean, just.
Yeah, we do have some images. We do have some images of the project that was taken in November for some of the wall murals that were completed.
Yep.
So I can more than welcome to share those with you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm driving by right now, you see all the work that's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
there's skin that's being replaced and the roofing and everything
Right.
else, so at least I see that there's activity.
Yes.
But just to I mean, I'm just asking that you verify and
We
people,
was out
and
at
you
the
do
site.
verify.
We was
Yep.
out at the site, I want to say, it was in December. We were out there, we toured the site with Skylar. So we did actually do a tour.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, motion to approve agenda item 4.2 with amended end of the year date.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Howard, 4.3, you can just read just the title.
Amend and loan the grant agreement with 949 Cleveland Street LLC for the properties located at 1017, 1023, and 1029 Cleveland Street to extend the agreement to September 1st, 2023 for the building improvements to implement the CRA food and drink grant and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same.
Any questions? Anyone from the public to speak to item 4.3? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve agenda item 4.3 amended to the end of the year.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Director's reports?
Jake Matthews, CRA Director. My first part of my report is an actual apology. During the last CRA work session, CRA staff provided an update on active grants approved by our trustees and those who are sent award letters from the CRA. Additionally, several grants-related inquiries from our trustees were addressed. It was later discovered that the information shared in this form was not current and therefore not accurate. As such, I'd like to extend an apology on behalf of the CRA for not ensuring the most accurate and updated information was shared out to our trustees, our applicants, as well as our citizens and stakeholders. The goal is always to be accurate and report out accurate, relevant, and reliable information. Therefore, we are currently reviewing and updating our grants programs, as well as auditing all applicant files. We will include a full update and include it as an agenda item at our April 2023 CRA meeting. This month, we launched, the Meet the CRA Director Series, which is an opportunity for CRA business owners, property owners, residents, and employees, and all stakeholders to sign up for a one-on-one 45-minute session with me to share whatever they'd like. These sessions take place every Tuesday and Thursday this month, and they've actually been remarkable and mutually beneficial thus far. These sessions have been hosted at businesses and partners in the CRA, Buzz as Business Solutions, the Clearwater Main Library, the Lucas Restaurant and Bar, as well as Nature's Food Patch Restaurant and Cafe. This great initiative was spearheaded by the CRA Business Assistant Administrator, Howard Smith. So I'd like to extend a special thanks to the businesses that supported us and hosted us, allowed us to come in there, as well as Howard for putting this together. Additionally, I've been walking in and out around the CRA, popping into businesses to speak with employees and owners to introduce myself, and to simply ask, how can we as a CRA help your business thrive and be more successful? One quote and piece of feedback that I'd like to share is, quote, "I felt listened to and I feel that under your leadership, the merchants can participate with the CRA in growth and development of downtown Clearwater," end quote. This quote is from one of the one-on-one sessions that just took place last Thursday. And already we've met twice with this particular merchant to activate their ideas and plans. We are excited for what is to come in the downtown CRA as we move forward collaborating with our Downtown Development Board, the Downtown Clearwater Merchants Association, businesses, property owners, residents, and the City of Clearwater residents. Vacancy assessments. We are looking at all ways to activate downtown. We are currently reviewing and assessing statuses of properties and of all properties that are vacant in downtown CRA. I met and spoke with business owners who either want additional space for their service expansion that they're already offering downtown, or want to move their home-based businesses, specifically a bakery, to downtown in the CRA. As a result, the CRA staff and Lopez and Howard Smith worked to create an updated, accurate listing of properties that are vacant in the downtown CRA so that we can touch base with business owners to start having conversations about plans and visions for those properties with the goal of engaging rich dialogue around collaborating, partnering to program and activate those spaces. We are focused on eliminating blight and vacancy so that our downtown is an economic engine that we all aspire for it to see. We want our downtown to be, to boast successful businesses, ample job opportunities, activated and programmed spaces and events for all, and bountiful foot traffic from engaged and excited citizens who can't wait to experience it. I would like to say that our event specialist, Vicki Shire, has spearheaded a new effort that we'd like to announce today, the Living the Culture series. And the first event in that will be called Taste of Ethnicity. It'll be taking place on Saturday, May 20th from 11 to 6. This inaugural cultural festival will be held downtown to commemorate World Diversity Day. As such, it is our goal to celebrate as many cultures as possible through art, food, performances, in an effort to bring awareness, education, and family fun for all downtown Clearwater. We aspire to celebrate and embrace the vast array of cultures and heritage represented in Clearwater and beyond. And this is in conjunction with our Office of Diversity and Equity Services for World Diversity Day. We also have several other Living the Culture series set for next year even, or we're looking at dates for next year even, so if you have any suggestions, any culture highlights, please let us know. Lastly, I'm working on a plan to slightly restructure and expand our agency around the organization, or expand the agency to round out the organization to better service a downtown CRA and to be prepared for the capacity required to fully support the North Greenwood CRA, which is coming on board shortly. Preliminary thoughts and ideas have been shared with the acting city manager's office as well as the assistant city manager as well as HR. Certainly I will work to fine-tune this plan over the next few weeks to share it with our CRA trustees. Our team will have North Greenwood focused events or a off-site event that will be composed of briefing talks, a working lunch, a mapping session, so that we're up to speed and hit the ground running when the North Greenwood CRA comes on board. I'd like to thank Jamie Lapko of the City of Clearwater Planning and Development Office, as well as Chuck Lane from Economic Development and the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition, who are partnering with me to provide our staff with all the updates they need based upon the North Greenwood CRA. This is taking place February 22nd. This concludes my report, and thank you to our trustees for the opportunity to serve.
Any questions? Vice Mayor?
So how are things going with, so I was down at the 3-on-3 event last weekend, Market Marie, or the weekend before, Market Marie this last weekend, saw a sign for the Hub Brewery coming 23-24 by the Good Guys, Nash Keys, Captain Cigar Bar, all that stuff. Any update on openings of those things?
Not that we've heard. I do know that we're working on better communication with businesses that are open. For instance, Flamboyant opened, and it just happened to be that I strolled by and saw it open. It opened on the 1st of February, so we're working on extending our, I guess, proactive business services as well, or supports and services as well, to businesses as well, so that we can have a better handle on when businesses open to cross-promote. But as it relates to those specific ones you asked about,
So for the Captain's Lounge, which is a cigar lounge bar, they are actually open this Friday. They're having a soft open, and then they will have the official grand opening on the 23rd. And it's my understanding they're reaching out to Amplify to be able to invite you all as trustees to be able to attend and potentially have a ribbon cutting ceremony. And as far as the brew store, that will potentially come online sometime next year. And that's the update when I spoke with Ryan, which is one of the co-owners as well as one of the individuals that's working on construction for that site.
Is the Market Marie going to continue through the summer?
They have a 6-month agreement with the DDB. I think it ends in April. They will have to come back for another grant request to the board.
Okay. And then if we have those new businesses, like you said one's going to open this Friday?
Yeah, it's for the Captain's Lounge.
Yeah. So if we have a new business that doesn't happen to join our chamber amplify right away or for whatever reason, the CRA can still have a ribbon cutting and celebration and get press, right? We can do that.
Well, typically, what we've directed people to do is work through Amplify because they have that process.
Right.
And from my understanding, I don't think they necessarily have to join
Okay.
Amplify to do, to request doing a ribbon cutting ceremony. I believe there is a fee, but I don't think they have to become a membership, but I will find out and let you know.
Okay. And then, so are you saying we don't have, you're working on vacancy assessments, so you don't currently have a list of how many properties are vacant in the downtown CRA?
We do,
We do?
yes.
Do you know what that number is?
Sure that it was up to date, and then I asked them to also go back and get actual owners per each property.
Okay.
So it was just beyond just the addresses, I wanted more information.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 8 pages.
We can provide the number. I don't have the actual number for that
Okay.
time survey.
And then I know that we've communicated about, getting storefronts filled, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose. But do we, how do you feel about setting a goal of, we want to have at least 5 filled by the end of the year? I mean, do you have a comfort level with a number, setting a targeted goal? And what would be a realistic number?
Once I complete this vacancy assessment and reach out to business owners, I think I will be able to. Some of the things that really were eye-opening to me, meeting with business owners now or last week to tell me that they reached out to individual places who wanting to either expand what they're doing, rent more space, and they're told no. I heard that from 3 different business owners who just called up and down. So now I'm asking them to allow us to kind of facilitate that process and see if there's something that we can do as a CRA to have those conversations with landlords to hopefully, I guess, get through some of those
Give them a
doors.
nudge, yeah.
So I'll have a better understanding of what I want 100% filled, but I also want to be realistic in speaking to them and seeing what it is that we can do.
Right.
As a CRA first. But I will definitely have that answer at our next meeting.
I mean, ideally, I think it'd be great to have a measurable goal. I know it's kind of tough, but, and then any update on the properties owned by Interstruck that are being worked on?
No, not as of yet. At last conversation with the previous assistant director, they were trying to go through the building permit process. And that was a conversation that we had in December.
Okay. And then, do you want to discuss at all the trash challenges around the East Gateway and what's going on there? How we can make it better?
Sure. So I've gone out countless times. Whenever the emails come through, I do go out to take a look. I literally went on, I think, a 3-hour tour with one of the citizens who typically sends our complaints or sends the complaints about these dumpsters, and not one was out of order or overflowing. I did find that many do have missing lids. I found that many of them are very close to the street and can't have the enclosures because of the ordinance that I've learned about. But small fixes, put lids on them. I wrote out several different times even after having that initial tour, and I was told that those pictures that are being sent are from previous, or they're not current. Most of them are not current. So the complainant told me that most of them are just from things in the past for the most part. So I've gone out throughout, even on weekends, Saturdays, even when we were out, riding around. We rode around together. I walked with her. We saw several of our, dumpster or removal trucks, 2 or 3 within that period, and none of them were full or overflowing. So I just happened to come back later that night. I've gone back on weekends. I just went back this past week from the most recent complaint. So I really can't find anything. I did meet with Rebecca from Code Enforcement, and also we spoke to Solid Waste. We're trying to just figure out when this could possibly be. But since I live, reasonably close, I'm always checking, and I personally don't see anything. But we'll continue to try to strategize to figure out what it is that we can do.
Yeah. Is it unrealistic to think that if, because it's been a problem, whether or not it's current or on the days when you're out there, but because it's been a problem in that area, if she takes a picture and it's, early enough in the day, I don't know if it's before noon, somebody could radio to a solid waste collector and say, can you swing by there and pick that up, and we'll bill that property owner some additional charge for having overflowed trash in that area? Is that a possibility?
I know that I have been working with Kervin and sending him over, and he sends staff out immediately. He did so over the weekend.
Oh, great.
Including as windows come in to see if there's issues or not. So we are addressing that, also on some of the properties that were provided in terms of where there's evictions taking place. They went out to work with the property management companies to make sure that they understand it's their responsibility to have appropriate containers.
Yep.
And what's available in terms of that we could increase pickups and or increase container size if necessary. So I know that the solid waste staff is working on that as they come in. And so we are, as soon as they come in and we have an opportunity to look at them, forwarding them over. And I know that Mrs. J has also been sending that over to solid waste as well, and also working with code enforcement.
Great. And I guess the last question I have is just on the police report. Any big changes in our CRA staffing of police and the homeless?
Not that I know of at this point. I did ask, I think they were going to send Ms. Ham out to answer your question specifically. We were just trying to coordinate a time for her to come to a CRA meeting to give a presentation on those and to give more insight into the numbers. As you questioned previously, we did meet about it twice, so perhaps I can get her on the next agenda.
Okay.
I think it was just a matter of the time frame and when the information was due, but we did ask that she come in and give a presentation so she can answer those detailed questions around the homeless matters that we're facing with CRA.
I asked that because I sit on, I'm chair of the COC board now, this year and for next year maybe. But we're looking at Safe Harbor and how it functions. And if the average stay at Safe Harbor is like 3 days, if it seems to be a revolving door of homeless that are there instead of it's jail diversion. And it's this philosophical discussion, is it a homeless shelter, is it jail diversion? And I'd just like to get a handle on how many of our Clearwater transports to Safe Harbor revolve around, come through that door. Are they being taken there frequently? That's kind of some of the information I'd like to know. Thanks.
All right, we will adjourn the CRA and call to order the pension trustees. Would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the December 12th, 2022 meeting. Have a motion?
Approve the minutes of the December 12th, 2022 meeting, minutes.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Any citizens to be heard on pension trustees? Seeing none, item 4.1.
Approve the following requests of employees: Eric Holmes, Public Utilities Department, and Anne Marie Knight, Finance Department, and Michael Olsa, Public Utilities Department, of ESSER pensions provided by Section 2.419 of the Employees Pension Plan.
Any questions? Have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
Approve the request of employees for a regular pension as provided by Sections 2.416 and 2.424 of the Employees Pension Plan.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve agenda item 4.2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.3.
Approve the new hires for acceptance into the pension plan as listed.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve agenda item 4.3.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Anything for the director's report? All right. We'll adjourn the pension trustees and reconvene the work session. We are on item 3.2.
Approve the third amendment to an existing development agreement between Triprop Clearwater LLC, Anko Holdings, Decana Holdings, and the City of Clearwater for property located at 400 Coronado Drive.
Good afternoon, Ellen Crandall, Planning and Development Department. This is the third amendment to an existing hotel density development agreement. The primary change is to add 0.1837 acres of land to the project area. This comes from the to be vacated South Gulfview Boulevard right-of-way. This amendment includes updated legal description and conceptual site plans to include this additional area. The number of hotel units and the height remain the same as previously approved, and no changes have been made to the amendment after it was presented at the February 2nd, 2023 council meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at this time? We'll be discussing that further on Thursday. 3.3.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Community Development Code addressing community gardens, detached dwellings, residential infill projects in the MDR district, fences, vertical mixed-use projects, landscaping standards, residential and commercial parking restrictions.
That's it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development. I did prepare slides for today, but I know I usually repeat them in the evening meetings during the official public hearing. I'll go very quickly through them, cognizant of everyone's time, and just to acknowledge we've had one-on-ones, so we've gone through a lot of this already, but I'll go more in depth during the hearing. So as mentioned, this is the first time we've had an ordinance of this size in several years, so that's part of why we had one-on-ones with y'all. It covers a variety of topics for sections of the Community Development Code. But there were some overall objectives, including providing clarity based on different staff recommendations, updating some processes, addressing certain direction that had been provided previously by City Council and past City Councils, and incorporating or addressing some changes that had been made to the countywide rules over the last several years. The first is community gardens. This would propose to allow them in the open space recreation district, as well as to provide limited on-site sales in the commercial, institutional, and downtown districts, and then establish that any other district that has a community garden, they could do temporarily, they could do occasional on-site sales temporarily. It proposes to establish some fence standards for community gardens, and I'll touch on that at the end because there was a recommendation through the Community Development Board to make certain changes there. The medium density residential district, this ordinance proposes to allow front setback flexibility for detached dwellings and to establish the residential infill redevelopment project use within the medium density residential district. The language is consistent with that is in the low medium density residential district. And this addresses some of the setback requests that have been approved more recently by the Community Development Board. This would allow them at the staff level. Fences was a bigger part of the code, so there were a variety of changes proposed, but the main one was something that was requested by City Council related to corner lots. This is a section of the code, fences in general, that staff deals with a lot, so you would have noticed a lot of other kind of restructuring and stuff. That was for clarity based on our experience and the types of questions we get, but I'll talk through corner lots more directly. So currently the code limits heights of fences that are located between the principal structure and any right-of-way to 4 feet in height. This would be the area that's shown in blue there in front of the principal structure on both sides. So this is a corner lot. There's 2 fronts in this example, which means there's a street on 2 of the 4 property lines. If someone wanted to have a 6-foot fence, they would be limited to having that in line with the principal structure or behind it, which is reflected by the pink line there. Going forward, what is proposed is to differentiate between the addressed front property line and any other front property lines that are unaddressed. So in this graphic, the non-addressed property line, the area where a 6-foot fence would be permitted, would be in that pink area. However, at council's direction, it would be required to be open or picket or open style. I did not include the graphic, but one is illustrated in the code amendments for the community. Anything else in the blue area would remain the same. That is the addressed front property line, and that would still be limited to 4 feet. This is a slide just illustrating some of the other ones. So the mixed-use districts would be limited in downtown for those vertical mixed-use buildings, this is another opportunity for us to incentivize the type of growth that we want, and this would allow full density and intensity or all development potential for a vertical mixed-use project. This is one of the ones that stems from countywide rule changes. The exception or exemption for artificial turf for parks and athletic fields was discussed, I believe, later last year by City Council, so we're bringing that forward for you. And then the residential parking restrictions, the residential parking restrictions are not new, but they would apply in areas of downtown where they were inadvertently removed, and the boat trailer and RV parking in the streets right-of-way is new, and that's to address some safety concerns. There's two different pieces that fall within the sign code. The first is the LED rope lighting around windows and doors. The code recommends prohibiting these citywide. The city has an interest in preserving the aesthetic quality of its neighborhoods and districts, and I touched on this in the staff analysis. The increased use of this type of lighting is inconsistent with the visually attractive urban environment that the city's sign regulations seek to preserve. And I know for one-on-ones there were some differences there of thought, so there might be discussion later. The second amendment addresses previous council direction related to attached electronic changeable message signs. This would create that as a type of signage, and it would be allowed within the downtown district for certain venues, and also certain design standards are established. These two proposals I think are pretty self-explanatory, so it would be to require pre-application conferences for all projects that are proposed in downtown and US 19, and then related to some of the recent bluff approvals, development agreements are proposed to, this would amend the code consistent with that to allow up to 30 years. Many of the amendments were in the US 19 and downtown zoning district, so I will move through these relatively quickly. Bike parking is proposed to be updated. I'll focus on the short-term and long-term bike parking. Currently, there's a short-term parking standard, but it's a one-size-fits-all, so this differentiates by use. And then also there's a proposal to add new long-term bike parking requirements for certain uses, and then to start to incrementally add bike parking by requiring it for certain changes of use and remodel and reconstruction projects. We're proposing to change the process for large sites, and those are defined in the code as those on 10 or more acres of land, to require a site plan process first prior to going to building permit. There's additional standards that apply to these sites, and similar to our business process study, we think overall this would help everyone involved in the process. There are several proposed changes to building designs, including requirement for upper floor windows and delineating and providing a little bit more direction for rooftop mechanical equipment screening options. And throughout the process, we've now had several additional years of reviews and examples of projects, and so we find at the staff level that sometimes there's new flexibility that may be recommended. So we're recommending some related to residential uses, cross-parcel connections, and employment-intensive projects. That one specifically is to reduce the acreage threshold from 5 acres to 2.5 acres. Many of the amendments are similar in the downtown district because we strive to maintain consistency in those, although the codes aren't exactly identical. So I'll focus on the ones that are a little bit different. So in this one, height transitions, we looked at our building step-back provisions, and currently it would apply to all fronts of a building, and the proposal is to only require it for the front of the building that's on the primary frontage. In the use and parking tables, the overnight accommodations in South Gateway would be removed. The downtown redevelopment plan does not establish a density for hotel units in the South Gateway, so this is a correction. It should not have been reflected in the table, so that's more of a correction. But like we discussed, the self-storage facilities, those are currently allowed in several of the character districts as accessory, and we're proposing to expand that to allow it in the downtown gateway. There are multiple site and building design changes. These are several of them the same as US 19, but also addressing swimming pools specifically in downtown where they hadn't really been discussed before. Flexibility, more options in downtown related to the building step backs, parking garages. It doesn't make sense to have a step back from a design perspective, so addressing that. Looking at U-shaped buildings where we had several that we've reviewed since then. Proposing to allow limited increases to surface parking for existing offices, but these would be outside of the downtown core. There are some existing offices that might need a little bit of additional parking. We like to support our businesses. And then a variety of other ones, walkways, surface areas, swimming pools, flood zones, historic buildings. So the Community Development Board reviewed this at their meeting last month, and they unanimously recommended approval with one recommended change, and that was specifically to community garden fences. There was a conversation about possible security and the need to, since there's not as much of an active use on the site, so they recommended allowing up to 6 feet high along front property lines, but if it was open style. So if it was 4 feet high, it could be solid. If it was anything taller, it would have to be open style. And so if it is council's pleasure, we could prepare a motion to amend and bring that forward to you on Thursday.
Do you support that or oppose it?
I'm kind of indifferent, to be honest. Like, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think if it's taller, I think open style is important. I looked at a variety of pictures. I think that of different community gardens, and the fence styles really vary a lot, from very kitschy to much more formalized. Our current community garden in downtown has a chain link fence, and that would not be allowed going, based on current downtown plan anyway. But there are ways to make it still inviting.
Vice Mayor.
Well, as someone who had a community garden there, I had a garden plot, but wasn't able to tend to it anymore, so I donated it. But they had material stolen, I mean, they keep wheelbarrows and tools and all sorts of things there that got stolen. And so we had to get a really heavy chain and a padlock, and so they need to be higher than 4 feet, I think. Materials are kept there. It's not just food growing, but there are valuable materials that are there.
I think that, I'm not trying to hurt you. I think that every community garden is in a different type of location, so it's hard to count for that. They have different approaches to security, whether they have sheds or other ways of securing it, but definitely keeping those materials on hand for the users of the garden, is important. I never could get my tomatoes to grow, but mine didn't have a fence. Maybe someone was stealing them, I don't know.
My tomatoes didn't grow there. But I do have a couple of other questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you have a reduced walkway width, which I'm not a big fan of. I wish our sidewalks were like 8 feet wide. But you have a picture of the North Ward School on that slide. Is that like where you're thinking? Where and why would you reduce a walkway width?
So the North Ward School is there to illustrate the historic buildings.
Right.
Because walkways aren't as exciting photographically. In the downtown plan has a requirement for 6 feet minimum on site walkways. And in some instances, occasionally, we have a pole that sticks out, and there's really no avenue to reducing it if it needed to be 5.5 feet. The way the language is written, it's that they have to meet the code to the maximum extent practicable. Okay. So that just would give staff some ability, but when they request flexibility, either in US 19 or in downtown, it moves it to a different level of approval. So if they were coming through as a building permit, it would come through as a site plan application, and staff would have the ability to review it, the members of the DRC, and it gets advertised in that notice.
Self-storage facilities in downtown Gateway, we really want them there? You think that's okay to have them there? No. But isn't that allowing it? Don't you have an amendment to allow them?
It is an amendment to allow it.
And why do you think it's a good idea to have them there, or to allow them there?
Well, in this particular district, there is the Verizon bill, I think it's still Verizon Frontier building that is kind of an atypical building. And that is a use that could potentially be functional in that. Where in downtown we took a different approach and said, in certain areas, self-storage could be okay. It would always have to be accessory to the existing use, so it's limited to 25% of the overall floor area. So, but, it's for consideration.
And then, do you have, I couldn't find a definition of short and long-term bike parking, the difference?
There's provisions in Article 3 of the code. I don't have it memorized, but I can tell you the short-term bike parking is uncovered. It's the little hoops and other things. We adopted those or established those standards several years ago when we started to require bike parking in US 19 specifically. When we added long-term bike parking in downtown specifically, that they were enhanced to include that, and that usually means some sort of security feature separate from just your bike lock, some sort of covering, but there's a wide variety of ways to meet the standards that are in the code. They're illustrated, but I could always send a link to y'all.
Okay. And then you've got a requirement for a pre-application process for downtown and US 19. Do you want to, is it downtown because it's a CRA, or we want to encourage, obviously we want to encourage development there, but do you want to loop in the North Greenwood CRA as well, or we can't do it yet because it's not totally finalized?
These are recommended because these are our two form-based codes. And so as such, they have building design standards, site design standards that are more detailed than the rest of our code. And we find that when we have the opportunity to meet with our applicants up front and kind of go through that, we can identify earlier any potential issues that they need to be aware of. So by the time they are submitting, we're hopefully a more complete application.
Okay. And then I guess the last question right now is the Marriott on Sand Key has this blue lighting that residents don't care for. It looks to me like rope, but it could be like bars lighting. It outlines their whole floors. If we prohibit rope lighting, does it go back? Would it apply?
You mean are things grandfathered?
Yeah, grandfathered in, or?
So that may be neon or LED lighting, and in the sign code, neon and LED lighting is not considered signage when it's used to emphasize architectural features, and it goes beyond to include architectural detailing and accentuating of site landscaping. The scope of the proposed amendment is really for just the lighting that's currently used, plugged in, and used for the windows and the doorways. As you've seen, it's kind of proliferating among our strip centers primarily. So that would be different, but I would need to look into that further.
Any other questions?
We could have a discussion now or on Thursday, but I need to discuss the LED rope ban as well as the marquees. I have a couple of questions about the marquees. We can do it on Thursday or not?
I prefer Thursday.
Perfect. I'm fine.
Simply because or you all can go on without me, but I have to leave at 5. I thought 4 hours would be ample for this work session. I was probably incorrect.
I'm okay with on Thursday. We can discuss it on Thursday.
All right. Thank you. 4.1.
Approve First Amendment to contract for exchange of real property between Barnell Evans and Sandra Evans and the City of Clearwater.
Good afternoon. My name is Dylan Mayu. I'm the Real Estate Coordinator for Economic Development and Housing. As noted in the narrative of this agenda item, on August 18, 2022, Council declared 918 Palmetto Street surplus and approved a contract for exchange of real property that would exchange 918 Palmetto Street for 900 Palmetto Street. City-owned 918 Palmetto Street is being leased by Hope Academy and is used as a playground for their daycare located at 920 Palmetto Street. The property being exchanged for 918 Palmetto Street is 900 Palmetto Street, located at the intersection of Palmetto and Vine. The site is in the proposed North Greenwood CRA district and is zoned commercial. A Phase 1 Environmental Site Assessment, ESA, was completed in November of 2022 by Cardno. Cardno has recommended a Phase 2 ESA due to the automotive use of the property located across Vine Ave, that's 1000 Vine Avenue. Though the potential contamination source is off-site and separated by a roadway, the Phase 2 ESA is recommended to confirm that contaminated groundwater has not traveled onto 900 Palmetto. The First Amendment to contract for exchange of real property would extend the original contract closing date to on or before August 25th, 2023, providing time for the city to complete the Phase 2 ESA. Staff is seeking funding for the Phase 2 ESA from the Environmental Protection Agency grant previously awarded to the City of Clearwater in 2021. If the use of grant funding is not approved, available funding from capital project, environmental assessment, and cleanup will be used. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions? Okay, we'll hear that further on Thursday. 5.1.
Provide direction on the future of Clearwater Gas Systems Propane Business Division.
Good afternoon, Bryan Langill, Interim Director for Clearwater Gas System. I'll be brief on this as I know we're running late on time here, but we did have one-on-ones on this item. This is our propane operations business that we operate that's separate from our natural gas utility. We presented revenues versus expenses at that on those one-on-ones, and we are experiencing losses per year to the tune of over $600,000 per year for fiscal year 2020 and 2022. In fiscal 21, we were actually a little higher than that, actually over $800,000. And so we were discussing that we are looking to exit out of the propane business because we feel like other companies can do the same job. The rate will more than likely have to go up because of that, but if we were to keep our operations as is, we would have to come to you at a later date to do rate increases for our customers. Just to let you know, we have about 2,000 propane customers right now. Majority of those are residential, just about 1,980 of them, and we got about 60 commercial customers. So 95 of those are in the city of Clearwater, so a bulk of our customers are actually outside of the city of Clearwater limits here. Bulk of them are in the unincorporated Pinellas County and Pasco County. So, and like I said, the revenues and expenses, we would have to significantly increase our rates in order to accommodate the additional revenues needed to justify keeping the business. Also, we have, it's a tough one because it impacts employees. So we discussed this last year with the potential sale of the natural gas system as a whole, but this one here would be 8 employees in total would be impacted. So we do have positions available for all 8 of those employees. Our vacancies are a little over 10 right now. So in fact, nobody would need to take a demotion. They would be able to transfer into other areas of our company in order, they could keep their job and they wouldn't have to go out or be laid off or look for a job in another department if they so choose. I mean, they would be doing a different job function, but they would have that opportunity to have that, even up to the supervisor level that we have right now in our propane operations. So we're very fortunate in that regards. But with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. And, we are looking for guidance on this item here and ultimately a vote on Thursday to ask us whether we should move forward with brokering it and getting an evaluation and doing, going through that whole process and then bringing it back to you at a later date.
Well, long term, it doesn't make sense to be in a business that's losing money, but if we raised our rates to the level of competitors, would we in fact be break even to profitable?
We would be break even, right about break even. We would be looking at adding $2.50 a gallon to the price, which we've done some analysis with other companies, and they're right around that price range. We're at $3 a gallon. The competitors, they'll start you off at $3 a gallon, but then they'll increase your rate, kind of like the cable company does, where they'll get you in at a lower rate and then go up from there. Obviously, we have to set rates through council we don't have that kind of flexibility as a business for propane. So essentially those companies would do that.
So if we got up to that competitive rate, though, you still believe that we should get out of this business? There's no synergies or long-term opportunity?
Yeah, I think that we should get out of this business because propane can be handled by other companies. We have three to four of them in this area right now where they can actually serve the customer, take over those customers, and then serve them. They wouldn't even have to take the tanks out of the ground or anything like that. They would just buy those assets because we own all the tanks in the ground at the customer site. So they would just buy those assets and then take over our customer portfolio and then continue to serve them as we do right now.
I think the only issue is getting the right price, because they are getting a built-in base that's significant.
Mm-hmm.
So the process matters.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments? Vice Mayor?
I'm happy to hear that all the employees will retain a job, not have a demotion, and be able to stay in the gas department if we sell this.
Yes, they will be given that opportunity. It will be different jobs though. So, some of our employees are drivers to drive the propane truck. So it will be a change, but we will give them the training that they need to, be successful in those positions if they choose to go in that direction.
And if we vote to go forward with this, how long of a process is it, do you think?
I'm estimating about 6 months to a year to go through the whole process. I'd hope to say closer to 6 months, but I don't know. We'll have to get that valuation and then go out and work with purchasing and do an RFP, more than likely, to bring in potential buyers and go through that process, the contracts. One buyer may not want to take all the assets, other ones may want to take everything, and it really just depends on, who's going to be responding to the bid. Companies that are within the area right now may not want the large tanks that we have on our site, but new companies coming into this market may want to buy those tanks and relocate them to another area. So there's a lot of variables there, and we won't know that until we get through into the process, pretty far into it.
Are those private companies able to adjust their price per gallon of propane a lot quicker than we are?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we cannot adjust our price other than the cost of the fuel. So we do fuel adjustments, but we don't make money off of the fuel. So fuel prices go up, we raise the price on the fuel component only. The non-fuel, which is our profit margin, that is fixed. We went to council 2 years ago on our rate study and made changes to our gas rates. If we want to do that again, we would have to come back to you with another rate study. We're actually going to be working on that on the natural side in the next couple months, and we'll be bringing back some recommendations on natural. But yes, we have to go to council every time we want to change our base rates.
And the rate study costs money?
Yes, it does.
All right, we'll finalize that on Thursday, 6.1.
Approve a contract for purchase of real property by the City of Clearwater for a property located at 697 Oberlin Drive.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Robert Kasmer, Real Estate Coordinator, Public Works. My pleasure to meet Mayor, council members. What we have here is a landowner attempted to sell his land in 2022. He listed it for $55,000. He then received 2 offers. Very happy about it. Then that changed. During the survey of the property, a pipe was identified, unrecorded, not via easement, that was identified to be the city pipe. The owner then contacted the city with 2 choices, to either relocate the pipe or buy the property. Very simple. In our due diligence, the cost to replace and remove the pipe was $120,000. Far exceeded the value of the property. In our due diligence, we identified from Pinellas County tax assessor, property appraiser, the land in 2021 was worth over $81,000. 2022 is worth over $100,000. So the land has much more value than the $50,000 he's willing to accept. The gentleman who owns the property now, his mom had passed away. Her wishes are being carried forward for the price of $50,000. He could certainly ask for more. We would be hard pressed in that our pipe is encroaching on his property. It was unplatted many, many years ago. He didn't know about it. We didn't know about it. It's now our responsibility. What we're trying to do is minimize our responsibility by offering him $5,000 less than his asking price of $55,000. We offered him $50,000, excuse me. He accepted that. So we are now $5,000 under his ask price. We are far below the assessed value of the property. Again, we're resolving the issue of having the easement encroachment of the water pipe, and we don't really have a lot of choice here. It's either $160,000 or $50,000. And that's where we stand.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
You're pretty fortunate he gets to accept 50,000. The
Yes,
city's mighty fortunate.
Well, the gentleman is an honorable gentleman. That's what his mom wanted the property to be sold for, and she's passing it on. So it's a very good opportunity, yes.
Consent? Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council members.
6.2.
Approve a service agreement with Park Mobile for pay by cell phone technology.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. Jeremy Elshouse, Parking Manager. The item before you is essentially a continuation of our agreement with Park Mobile for the app, to continue to have the app here in Clearwater. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Weren't we at 35 cents at one point?
We were, but
Okay.
their price did go up. A nickel a transaction.
And have all the cities that are involved with Park Mobile ever thought of going out for an RFP together?
That's an interesting, not that I know of. I do know that Tampa recently went out for something. They're adopting several. So they're going to have multiple. And we're waiting to see how that works out for them, because that does entail some more kind of work on our end, on the back end, to coordinate all the
So you have to have multiple softwares? And is there going to be different pricing?
Well, again, I'm waiting to see how that kind of, I do talk with the regional directors and managers from the parking systems here, and we kind of compare notes. So I'm waiting to see how that all works out, because that is intriguing to me a little bit. 6 is a little bit more than I'd like to grab onto, but given our citizens, our customers, option might not be a bad idea. It puts us in a better position the next time we go to negotiate, if we have more options on the table.
Other Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, so I've been using Park Mobile a long time. In other cities, that's the beauty of it. I mean, you get used to it. It's on your phone. St. Petersburg's had it for a while, and it's always convenient to just pay on your phone, and then you have a countdown timer, which is nice. You don't have to get up, put money in the meter, you just put more money on it. I guess my concern is that we've had some issues with people that have flip phones, and they don't have smartphones that kind of make it difficult for them to use Park Mobile. You really have to have a smartphone for it to work. I did find out that you can if you have a flip phone, you can, and a computer set up an account associated with a credit card, and then you can call on a phone number. So if you have a flip phone or some unsmart phone, you can dial that phone number that is associated with it.
Is that a dumb phone?
Yeah, dumb phone, yeah.
Okay.
And it automatically takes some money out. So I just wanted to say that publicly for the benefit of the people, that there's still a workaround with a dumb phone.
Yeah, no, thank you.
PC, right?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. We did add that feature. I think it was initially, we had access to it from the beginning, but it didn't become really necessary until the meters went away downtown, and then, so, yeah, there's a 1-800 number on there, a toll-free number to call, and you can just use any phone. Doesn't have to be a smartphone.
Other questions for Chairman? Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. 7.1.
Approve purchase orders with SHI International, CW Government LLC, and Carasoft Technology.
Mayor, council members, just a reminder that in accordance with the state legislature's passage of the Cybersecurity Act, we're modifying these next two items to simplify some of the languages and be less specific items, as well as certain documents will not be posted on the website. So the attachments are not included with this agenda item. But this particular item will be with three vendors. SHI will be approximately $825,000, CDW will be approximately $900,000, and Carasoft is about $125,000. They range from network equipment and appliances, monitoring services, and other essential or critical infrastructure services from these vendors.
Questions for Mr. Mayor? Consent?
Yep.
7.2.
Approve purchase orders with SHI International for
This item is for purchase of software licensing and maintenance through SHI International. This includes licensing for our existing Office Productivity Suite, but also adds licensing needed for our upcoming Unified Communications project and enhanced security programs. Yeah. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. 8.1.
approve vehicle use agreement between the School Board of Pinellas County and the City of Clearwater.
Good afternoon, Sandy Clayton, Recreation Division Manager. The agreement before you is will allow us to work with the Pinellas County School Board to provide transportation using school buses and their drivers for summer camp programs, for field trips, and allow us to have the children go out on the trips.
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
I just had a question about this. I know we've done this before and fully support it. I just thought for my edification, our edification and due diligence, when we're renewing a program like this, how does it compare to the cost last year? So I know they're having trouble with bus drivers, getting bus drivers, and maybe the cost of fuel is up. And I just wondered, are we paying more this year? Just to have an understanding.
So last year, the Pinellas County schools didn't provide the service at all. And this year, they actually are only promising if they do provide the service, it'll be during the month of July. So we have to go with other private vendors. Last year, it cost us about $44,000 total for all last summer. The cost for a private, this is like Assured or other transportation systems, is probably about twice as much as what the county charges us. So we're real excited. We hope that they're going to provide it because it will bring the cost down.
So we hope that we're able to get this for $30,000 for the month of July for field trips for summer camp.
Correct. Now, we will have to rely on the other transportation providers for the other months of May, June, and August, but this will at least allow us to do it with the school board.
Okay. Why don't we want to just go with a private for those 3 months and keep one provider?
It's
Is it?
a
Oh, that's right.
savings.
Yeah, the
It's almost
savings.
half as much.
And so you haven't come to us for that approval yet for the private ones?
I don't believe it has to go in front of council to to approve those. This is, the only reason I think this has to go before council is because the county requires us to sign an agreement with them to provide this service.
So they think they can cover a month with drivers and buses?
That's what they're saying, yes.
So.
Is there a reason they're only limiting it to that month? No idea.
I have no idea. That we were lucky to get that, so it's up to them.
Consent? Thank you. 9.1.
Authorize an increase on purchase orders to Odyssey Manufacturing.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Rich Gardner, Director of Public Utilities. The item before you today is for an increase to purchase order for chemicals used for treatment at the water and wastewater facilities. Sodium hydroxide is used for pH adjustment and corrosion control of the city's water treatment facilities. Sodium bisulfite is used at the water reclamation facilities to dechlorinate treated effluent prior to discharge to surface waters, and at the city's RO1 plant for dechlorination before the RO membranes. The reason an increase is required is due to a significant price increase of sodium bisulfite earlier this year, as well as increased usage of the chemical. The new contract amount will be $470,000, representing an increase of $70,000 for the current contract year. We're also asking for a second contract year amount of $540,000, which reflects a $140,000 increase from the originally approved amount. I'm asking for your approval to increase the PO and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Vice Mayor.
So, again, it's like we can't say no because we can't go buy this product off the shelf, right? We need it to operate, and but we have this contract. And so in that letter that's attached, that last paragraph really speaks to the goodwill of this provider, right? They've done good things, they've provided on time, we haven't had any issues, right? So it's kind of this supply thing. And they're asking us to step in and help them meet these expenses, that price increase.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So I get that. I mean, that's okay. But I think when there's a price increase and really breaking of the contract, right, that we've signed, should we have like procurement, legal, financial weigh in and have like, I've had these three oversight, I've had these three departments look at this and it's.
So we work closely with them on all these price increases. We go to procurement and they look at the price index for that particular commodity, and they advise us, and then we work with Owen from the legal to do it. So somehow I get the short straw and I have to present it to you guys.
Yeah.
Well, on every one of these, I'm working with procurement and legal each and every time I come before you.
Okay. So maybe I missed it, but maybe if this has been approved by procurement, legal, and the department controller, whatever we've got,
So I don't know what you see in Legistar, but they approve it after I do, so.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that, but
They don't see the approval workflow.
okay.
Yeah. So maybe a sentence, just a sentence in the legislative text that says this has been approved by these three departments or something. Again, as I look at things with solid waste or other things, it's like, why weren't things caught? And if there's a sentence there that says, look, all of this due diligence we went through, then it's there.
Mr. Margolis?
Sure. I mean, just a couple observations. So, first, I mean, as far as council items are concerned, I mean, legal does review items before they come to council for legal sufficiency, including this item. However, what legal is reviewing is the question of whether council is being asked to take a lawful action. And so the question being presented to legal, although important, is a narrow question. The question is, can council legally approve a price increase or a commodities increase if you choose to do so? And the answer to that narrow question is yes. I think the broader question, which is more of a policy question, is how should we deal with a vendor who, in the middle of our contract, ambushes us with a price increase? Certainly, we would be well within our legal rights to just say, no, y'all can fulfill your deal, and if you refuse, we're going to sue you for breach of contract. that would absolutely be within our legal parameters. And if that's the direction that either city admin or city council wants to go, we can do that with these vendors, and I have no problem being tough with them. The problem we have with some of these products is that either they are time sensitive in terms of the city's supply, and or we have very little competition in the marketplace. And so here, you may have a very, very small number of vendors out there who can offer the same product. And I do feel better about this particular item because, to Mr. Gardner's point, procurement did look at this and they did find that the competitors who are out there were offering the same or higher price than even this price. So even though personally I'm extremely skeptical of accepting a price increase in the middle of a contract, because even though where I come from, a deal is a deal and I have no problem being tough with them, under the particulars of this case, where it still is the best pricing for the city and there doesn't appear to be anything else in the marketplace that we could really do, we're probably stuck with that. But is this going to inform the city's decision or staff's decision on partnering with some of these vendors in the future? Yeah, maybe it should.
Is there any stabilization in view on some of these?
I mean, it's getting a little better, but we're still out there. The price of gas has come down. All these commodities are really dependent on fuel because to deliver them.
So it's transportation.
So it's transportation. It came down and then it went back up a little bit. I mean, we're monitoring it. We plan on, if it comes down, if the index comes down, sometimes the index are negative. If it's negative, we're going to approach them and say, hey, we worked for you when it was high. You need to work with us when it's low.
Can this go on consent?
It may go on consent. I do have a question, though. I know it was suggested by the vice mayor. Is there consensus of the group to include a statement regarding those items where there is a price increase, that the appropriate departments have reviewed it? Do we want to include that statement in the agenda cover? I need direction from council.
Is there ever a time where they aren't?
No. It wouldn't pass it through legal for the most part. Yes, everything is being reviewed, and we have an internal workflow that we can verify with, and usually by the time legal reviews it, they review it before it even goes out to any of the staff, and staff has been directed to work with procurement prior to entering an agenda item. So assuming everybody has followed those instructions, then yes.
So in other words, it would be a mistake if it weren't reviewed.
Correct.
So that means that every agenda item like that, we can just insert a sentence that says, this recommendation was reviewed by procurement, legal, and finance. I mean, it just...
Not all, but yes, and in his case, yes, all those departments would, but if it's the pleasure of the body to include that statement in the agenda item. That's what I'm getting at.
I think it's great for I didn't know that was there. I'm not privy to all those steps. And I think it's really good for the public to understand that this is the oversight we have. This has gone through multiple departments and been checked, and those are how we're making our decisions up here, right? I mean, we're not experts in finance or procurement or legal.
Well, I am in finance, but
What would be the problem with having that sentence on an agenda item? I think it's a nice transparency that this is how we are doing our due diligence. It's not hidden.
no, it's just, I don't know why it's necessary if that's the process that it all has to go through anyways. That's where I have an issue with it.
Well, we have residents coming in every day. I mean, people are moving in here, businesses are moving in. I just think people need to understand how our city operates.
The thing is, let's say there's an omission, does it suggest that it wasn't going through the process? I would prefer just a general statement maybe at the bottom of the agenda, than rather have each item have which department it went through. Because then if there is an omission, does it suggest that it wasn't, that it didn't go through? I don't know.
What is the workflow for you? I mean, what does this add? I mean, there's so many things that we do that we don't lay out every single detail. That's where I have a problem with it.
So agenda items are drafted internally in a department. Before it even gets outside of the department director needs to approve it. So there's already an internal review from the person who's drafting it to the person who's actually approving it, and then once it leaves the department, it goes to legal for review, and then at that point, once they have reviewed the contracts or the agenda item and make sure it's legally sufficient, then at that point, other departments are going to start looking at it. So you have finance, you have risk. Then it goes to it goes to me. I just look for the grammar, making sure that it's correct. Then it'll go to the assistant city manager and then to the manager. So there is an extensive approval process.
Mr. Margolis.
One suggestion that may kind of accomplish everyone's goals here, because certainly adding that language to each and every item could prove challenging for different reasons, but what if we were to do something either on our website or something else that's public-facing or forward-facing so they can see the approval flows? Certainly it's public record anyway, and I think that to the Vice Mayor's point, most people in the public do not understand what type of review process is out there. So if we were to put out something on our website that actually says, hey, our approval flows, for example, I mean, we could publish that without a problem, so people would know that for each item, this is what it goes through. I will say specifically as to legal, I would emphasize, and if we're going to do this in any format, I would want to emphasize that legal is reviewing this just to make sure the council is taking a legal action. As for the wisdom of that action, that's a policy decision for the council.
On us.
Yeah.
So we do have a diagram, a workflow diagram that shows basic items. So it'll be based, not specific items, it'll be contracts, purchasing, real estate. So we can definitely do that. It's already on our launch pad. It's internal.
I don't have a problem with that. But
What do you think? It's actually better for the public. It's more explanatory and it's consistent.
That's fine, yeah. I just, sure.
Consent?
Yes. Is that a consent item?
It is. We didn't get it on there. 10.1. Thank you, Reg.
Declare list of vehicles and equipment surplus.
Any questions on the list?
My laptop's frozen.
It's only 12 items.
Yeah.
Consent?
Yeah.
10.2.
Authorize an increase on purchase order to WM Recycle America.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Michael Maxwell, Chief Innovation Officer, Interim Solid Waste Director. Following the discovery that the city was out of contract with waste management back in early January, we were instructed to acquire recycling processing services, which we did under impractical to award on a bid basis. We did not have options at all at that point. So we entered into, I won't call it an agreement, but we had a pricing letter with Waste Management, which we used. That was for $150 a ton. At that time, we did a $50,000 PO approved by the interim city manager, and then we increased that in early February to $100,000, which is the maximum for the city manager's approval. We used about $35,000 between January 9th and January 31st, and based on a number of different factors that have changed, we have now asked to increase this an additional $300,000 so that we can, in theory, process all of the recycling. We know that that probably won't happen for a variety of reasons, including contamination, but we would at least have the ability to process all of the materials that we will be receiving between now and the end of April. So that is the request today, is to move forward with both Waste Management and Waste Connections. Waste Connections cannot take all of our materials. They do have a lower price. Waste Management has expressed that they can take all of our materials, however, they have the higher price. So we would need to manage through that best we can, but we're also going through the process of acquiring a longer-term contract, which hopefully would include some revenue sharing with the process.
Was disappointing to see that the county got no responses for their bid, obviously. This is an area that's really in flux. We've had issues. I think you all have gotten it now under control, but it's going to continue to be an issue with China exiting that entire market. I mean, I support going forward with this until we can get, a long-term contract where we're getting sharing on the revenue side. But I think as a stopgap, this is what we need to do.
I think so too.
Other questions or comments? Consent?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell.
Sir.
On that, 10.3,
Provide direction on issuing customer credits for recycling service charges.
Right, so Micah Maxwell, Innovation Officer, Interim Solid Waste Director. I was going to break it up into sort of two conversation points today. One was on the city ratepayer side, the other on the municipal partner side. As it relates to the city ratepayers, at the last meeting we provided some information about refunds, both at a partial credit level and at a full credit level. That partial credit was the difference between disposal rates at the waste to energy plant versus the disposal rate through the recycling processor at whatever time it was during that period of the 6 months. The full credit was based on, in essence, refunding ratepayers the entire amount that they paid during those 6 months. For residential single family, on the partial credit side, it would come out to about $4.66 per single family residential customer, totaling out to be $177,056.91. That also, that $177,000 includes commercial and multifamily, though we cannot give you a per customer amount for those, but it is included in that overall amount. The same is true for the full credit. I can only give you the residential, single-family residential side of it, which is $20.22, but the total amount is $1,123,417.91. Any questions on that part of it?
any questions? Okay.
Okay. So the second half of this is on the municipal partners. So this is a little bit different in how we charge them versus how we charge the normal ratepayers. And then we also charge Safety Harbor and Bel Air differently. Safety Harbor is charged for disposal, processing, and transportation charges. Bel Air is charged for all of those and also for collection charges. For a full credit, Safety Harbor would receive $62,925.63 during that period. And Bel Air, even though they have less tonnage, would be $64,978.02. The big difference there is the collection piece of it that we do not do for Safety Harbor. They drop their materials off to us and we transport them. For the partial credit, what we have identified is basically looking at the processing fees that we charge them. They're around $30 a ton. If we focused on that piece of it, the cost for Safety Harbor would be $22,000, the credit for Safety Harbor would be $22,343.87. For Bel Air, it would be $5,002.28. Any questions on this?
Well, I don't know if you want to discuss this more on Thursday. I'm happy to discuss it both, but I mean, I believe we had a cost associated with this. I think a full reimbursement when we still had transportation costs, tipping fees, and everything else, I think is an unwise use of resources. There was still a cost incurred. I believe in giving back to our own customers and to Safety Harbor and Bel Air the delta in what was expended. I think it is defensible, and we've talked about regaining everyone's trust. the best way to regain everyone's trust is do it right from here on. And I think we're doing that. But I don't think you can ever buy trust. Trust is earned. That's how it is in my business, and I think it is up here as well. And I think the difference is, I won't support it personally, but I think the best thing to do is reimburse people for the difference in the costs. And whatever we do for our residents, we need to do for our external customers as well.
I don't agree.
That's okay.
It's, to me, it's a little bit more than that, because it involves effort from our citizens to do what they did, and they fully expected it to be recycled, not just picked up. And it was our error, and it was our error for 6 months. And I understand it's a big cost. However, with the residuals of 25K over the minimum, I can't in good faith say, no, let's keep it. I always hear feedback from people all the time. This one, I have to say, was just, it was swift, and it was like consensus. Everybody felt that they lost their trust, and they spent so much time preparing and getting all this ready. And there was no, like, two sides. Everybody wants full credit. Not refund, but credit. And so I will vote for full.
Vice Mayor?
I too think we should give a full reimbursement. I think, or the full credit. I think there are a couple of reasons. I agree with Council Member Teixeira also, but I also think that there's a price to pay for a colossal error. Otherwise, it's just like, well, we made a mistake and there's no real consequences except for extreme embarrassment and, trying to figure out how to make it right going forward. But I think it's right to give a full credit. And I will tell you that it weighs, part of me making that decision is the $40 million in reserves, which are $20 million over kind of the required. And I understand that we were saving money or putting things away with the intent of having our own MRF, right? Which we may or may not go forward with, probably not, who knows. But anyway, we have $40 million that's been sitting there, and that has weighed on my decision as well. And I think it will make it easier to make it right and move on without a bunch of questions about how much did I get reimbursed and how many trucks did they really take in December or January or whatever. It's like, look, we identified this problem. It happened within these months. I'm going to credit you those months of recycling, and we're moving forward, making the best decisions with the data that we have going forward. And we're not going to be answering questions and continuing with who got what refund and how much was it. If it's not so much of an accounting challenge, I think the, Bel Air and Safety Harbor, we could refund the actuals. I think we could do it differently that way.
Why would they be different than our residents?
Well, they must be, contracted with us for some financial advantage that they're getting, rather than contracting with, having their own haulers or their own semis that go over to Ybor City, I guess, for Safety Harbor.
So in your opinion, we're going to make, I won't say it.
I think Bel Air and Safety Harbor are our clients, just like our residents were.
Yeah.
In my mind, we do it to one, we do it to all.
Well, and I think, is it part of the analysis going forward whether we want to have clients, whether it's financially beneficial to have, to service other smaller municipalities? Is that part of the big picture look?
I'm sure we'll get to that. But we've got a lot of work that we can do prior, before we even answer that question. But yes, we will end up there.
It's not a big deal. If we want to include Safety Harbor and Bel Air, that's not a huge thing for me.
Councilmember Albrecht.
You know, as I said before, we screwed up, and this was more than just us screwing up. This was a public trust mistake. You know, when I think about it, what the mayor said makes sense. I mean, we did have expenses that we incurred, but we screwed up. And it's a very complicated issue because, and we've discussed it up here before, not everything goes to recycling. You got contamination from the customers. I mean, my mind gets boggled when I think of everything. It's not a very clean, cut and dried thing. So I go back, I reset myself back to say, okay, we screwed up. I think we owe our customers a refund, and end of story. That's to go ahead and restore our public trust by, from this point on, doing the best we can, which you've just outlined, you know, and we'll do the best we can. I mean, you know, when I talk to people about this, I say, look, even if we get back on track and we're doing everything the right way, it's not 100% every bit of stuff they throw away is going to go to recycling, because it just doesn't work that way anywhere. But I keep bouncing back to the thing that we made a mistake. Let's make it right, and then let's move forward the right way.
Mayor, I just had one quick thing to add, and it just relates to how we bill the municipal partners versus how we bill our ratepayers. The ratepayers, of course, we do a rate study and blend the rate over a number of years. For the municipal partners, it's a little different. We do a blended rate for disposal, that disposal cost I mentioned to you earlier, based on how much we have disposed of at the waste-to-energy plant versus the recycling plant. We blend the rate, so you know, they're in essence getting what the residents might get if we did the partial. It's very similar to that in their disposal line item already, so they already received that portion of it. Now they get billed via the rates for Safety Harbor or the rates for Bel Air, but as it relates to how we bill them versus bill our ratepayers, they're already receiving that blend between recycling and waste energy.
Okay, we'll discuss it further on Thursday. 11.1.
Approve a funding agreement between the City of Clearwater and PSTA.
Michael Maxwell, Chief Innovation Officer. This agreement is to provide enhanced transportation services between March 1st, 2023 and April 30th, 2023. It's our normal spring break agreement. Don't ask me how it belongs to me right now, but it's because I've been around it long enough to be most knowledgeable about it, I guess. Basically, it adds some revenue hours to the Suncoast, PSTA Suncoast Trolley and the Jolly Trolley agreements. The focus really is on the local spring break weekends, which are the weekend of March 11th and the weekend of March 18th this year, and then also the Sugar Sand Festival weekends. The agreement calls for us to split the costs of the enhanced hours with PSTA 50/50. There are a couple of changes to the Legistar document, which I'm not sure if Ms. Call was able to hand out yet. It sounds like she did, but I have them here as well, just so you can see them. The first one was the change to the cost. Both of these changes that occurred adjusted that cost down. You can see there, that's the new amount and price, $96,625.42. And then this Exhibit A will show you where those adjustments occurred. The first was related to the pricing, the total cost per hour that is based on some adjustments that we're making to the overall agreement, which will be before you later, hopefully at the next meeting. That drops the per hour price. Additionally, it's right at the bottom. You can see there, sort of near the bottom right here, that is the number of hours increased. We found an error in the spreadsheet. It reduced it by about 70 hours. So that also reduced the price.
Nice to see the price go down.
The only one today. So questions? It's an incredibly important time of year for us, and, to alleviate any of the traffic and have these additional hours, I just think it's important. So, I fully support this. Councilmember Albritton.
Are we still doing City Hall, or are they going to do next door at the CMA property to pick up and?
I believe it's at City Hall, unless there's been some change that I'm not aware of.
So the demolition of the City Hall will be just in the back portion and the
My
parking
understanding
lot?
is there's still an area there that they're going to use, yes.
Okay, good.
Other questions? Comments? Consent?
Yes.
12.1.
Mayor, 12.1 involves active litigation. I prefer to discuss it one-on-one if we could.
Okay. 12.2 through 12.4 are second readings. Any questions on those? Okay. And then we've got anything else, Mr. Margolis?
I just wanted to say welcome to Jared Simpson, our new attorney. Jared has experience representing City of Lakeland as well as City of Tampa. He has a terrific background, and so he's just joined our office. And so if you're in my office, then stop by and say hi to Jared.
Ms. Boyer, anything?
I do have two items, just quickly. We have received requests from council members in regards to having presentations done by external entities, such as other municipalities by the county. And a response that we've received on a couple of those requests is that it would be preferred if there was a consensus by the council in order for them to do a presentation. So I know that this is something that we have discussed. Vice Mayor Beckman did ask me to put that on the agenda, and I missed it, so I am bringing that up under city manager items so that we have an opportunity to discuss this, and or we could obviously have a further conversation on Thursday if consensus is granted.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Yes, so I had asked months ago to have a presentation by the TDC to understand funding, and with the anticipation that the Phillies may be asking for funding from us soon. We know that, St. Pete has gone with a raised development kind of proposal to start looking at. I've asked for a presentation by 211 to get a good understanding of what we're up against here in our county, and in particular Clearwater, as far as what are the needs of some of our most vulnerable population, our families, people of limited income and elderly. I think we need to understand that. And most importantly, I really would like a presentation by the county, someone from social services as well as finance in the county, to really talk about where our tax dollars are being used in the county, especially the lanes for social services and other things like that we can contribute to. And so, those are the three things that I would like consensus from you all to have a presentation before we talk about the budget. Because it's really important, I think, for us to each hear the same message from different stakeholders in our community about the landscape that we're dealing with here as we make budgetary decisions this season. And I'm most interested, too, as we make, allocations to different nonprofits or other organizations in the city that are real discretionary. I think we need to have a unified understanding of the reality of what we're looking at in our county before we sit down at the ledger book and start writing checks and doling out money. I need that information, and I need that information to do my job, and I think for us to function as a body of 5, we need to hear the same information from experts.
Well, the TDC is coming this Thursday, so that's already on the agenda.
I didn't know that.
It's right here.
Oh,
It's right here on
yeah.
our agenda.
Okay. Great. How about 211 in the county?
I don't have a problem with 211. The county is in all the social services is in their budget. I mean, you can go into their budget and look. So I don't know the purpose of that one.
Well, I'd like to know what, it's not in their budget where Clearwater dollars go. And I would tell you that in my COC meeting this morning, we had an extended conversation about Safe Harbor and its funding and its classification of a homeless shelter or jail diversion. And, apparently the sheriff said it costs $2 million or so to operate it, and if somebody wants to operate it, here are the keys, to the castle. Come on in and do it. And the question is, where are they getting that funding? And so the Board of County Commissioners is allocating money to Safe Harbor. How much of it, is from Clearwater, and where is our funding going? Because I'll tell you, in regards to Safe Harbor, it is not functioning as a homeless shelter. It's jail diversion. The average stay there is 3 days. People that enter Safe Harbor have substantial mental health and addiction issues. If their average stay is 3 days, do you really think that they're getting any help with addiction or mental health challenges? That's why it's a cycle. That's why it's a revolving door. It's not doing what it needs to do. And if it needs to be better funded, or we need to have a whole different organization, we need to understand that. I need to understand where they're getting their funding, because those are Clearwater people that are revolving in and out of there.
Hasn't the Continuum of Care Board asked for this?
We're not getting it. We're not getting that information. And so I'll tell you, when we have joint providers and funders meetings, we had one in December, we're having one this Friday, but I'm on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, so I have to go to that quarterly meeting, because I love going to the providers and funders meetings, because that's where these are people that have boots on the ground that are telling, the funders, these are our challenges. And it's the reality of the situation, and funders are saying, we don't have enough money, or we're limited. And so I would like to hear it from the county, who has the big lane of dealing with all these types of things. What are you doing? Do you have enough money? Because if they have enough money, why don't we have a case management ratio of like 14-1 or something at Safe Harbor and make a difference?
Have you ever heard a not-for-profit say they have enough money? Just out of curiosity, having sat on a lot of not-for-profit boards, I don't think I've ever heard anyone ever utter that out of their mouth as an executive director.
Well, I would like that understanding, and I'll tell you.
But have you ever heard that?
Oh, that nonprofits have enough money?
Have you ever heard an executive director have those words come out of their mouths? We have enough. I'm just curious.
Oh, no.
Enough money?
No.
Have you ever heard that?
No, I haven't heard that. No. But I've also have been told, my understanding is that people can wait on hold at 211 for like 4 hours. So, again, I need this. I think we all need it to understand our community. I think we need to understand our community.
Have you talked to any of the county commissioners that you serve with?
No, but they'll be, they're next in line. If we don't have consensus to have this presentation here before the Clearwater Council about how the county is doing with our money related to their lane with social services, then I'll go to a county commissioner and ask for it. But as I told you, in that provider funders meeting, and there were probably at least 60 of us in that room. It was at the Habitat, in December, it was at the Habitat Center off Ulmerton. Almost every single one of them said, I want to watch that meeting. I want to know that information. And so, it's important to get that information. It really is.
Okay. I want to think about that until Thursday. I also have some people I want to talk to, so. I have been told that there is some concern that there's micromanagement coming from the city of the county. And the county's not certain that they want to get in the middle of that.
Well, I don't want to micromanage. I just want transparency. I just want a financial report.
I'm just telling you
Yeah.
what I've been told.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, don't kill the messenger.
Nope.
I'm not with the county, I'm with the city.
I know you are.
I'm sure that we could put a request in to ask, in terms of funding levels, in terms of what cities participate and at what level. Certainly to do that if that's helpful. And then what the county funds as well. I mean, I'm sure we could get that breakdown, so then there's that information.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you formalize so that you can bring it on Thursday exactly what you're looking for?
Sure.
So we have a better idea of, we're not talking about the entire budget of the county. You're talking about a sliver, right? That would be beneficial for me to understand what the specific ask is, okay? And then we can discuss, having them come.
Okay. Part of it is questions like, when my Clearwater residents call me, or I go out to their house and, they're on the verge of being evicted, and they say, I've been on hold with 211 for 4 hours. Or when I'm told today at the COC meeting, we hover right around 140 families living in cars. Okay? Some of them are Clearwater residents. When we have elderly that are being evicted from their homes, if it's not our lane, and you said it's not our lane, and I agree it's not our lane, the city's not in that business to provide social services, but if it's the county's lane and my residents are sitting on hold for 4 or 5 hours, there's a problem. If residents are, circulating in and out of a homeless shelter because case management is, 75 to 1, there's a problem. And who is going to hold the county accountable if not the municipalities that pay taxes to it?
Well, municipalities and citizens.
And citizens. I represent the citizens,
We all do.
Yeah, right, we all do. I know we do. We do. We do. And we represent the most vulnerable that don't always have, the luxury of writing, setting a scheduled meeting, blah, blah, blah. So, anyway. All right, so we're going to have the TDC. We got consensus for a 211 presentation? Okay, and we're going to think about the county.
And if you could come up with a more exhaustive list
Sure.
of what you're looking for from them. And then we can add that to the council discussion items for Thursday. Okay? Along with the ARPA funds and the interest. I'd just soon hold off on that until Councilmember Bunker is here.
Okay. The ARPA fund, that's just ARPA fund interest?
Right.
Okay. And I have one little thing.
Councilmember Albritton, I'll come back to you.
I wanted to talk about the causeway invasive species removal. We brought it up, I think, the last work session. Maybe we could bring it up Thursday night. I'd like to have a discussion on that, see where we can go with that.
Is that why you've had to sit here?
Enjoy the meetings. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Where's my candy bar, Dan?
Jennifer's
City
supposed to pass them
manager got
along.
two
She said she was going to pass them
minis.
down.
I need a sugar fix, but go ahead.
So several work sessions back, we were asked to obtain an estimate for the removal of evasives out on Memorial Causeway.
Just kidding.
The estimate came back at $29,900 to remove the invasive trees and the stumps from Memorial Causeway. So whatever you folks, yes.
That's on both sides?
Yes, the entire causeway.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the amount?
$29,900.
How long will that last?
The work? Yeah.
Well, no, like before they start growing back up?
They come right back. I mean, they will remove the stumps, but I mean, it's not going to be.
Long-term?
It's not permanent.
But they'll take them out, right?
Yes, they will.
And we're talking about, I mean, I've kind of walked the causeway. There's some, of course, I don't consider oaks and palm trees invasive species, but there's lots of Brazilian peppers and sea grapes that could come out, and you'd have little windows going down the causeway, and we ruin. I think it would make the mangroves healthier too.
No doubt will.
Questions? Do we need an item, though, to vote upon in the future? Yeah. I mean, does this need to go out to bid, or we just use?
No, we have this under our
vendors?
current contract with O'Neill's.
Yeah, the dollar amount is small anyway, I mean,
Yeah,
so
it
certainly
is.
well under the normal threshold for council approval. But I certainly appreciate bringing it up for public discussion, because we know there are so many aspects involving removal of species here in Clearwater, and so it's good to have a public discussion about the topic.
But it is land we control.
Yes.
No question about that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Will that be on an agenda item on a future council meeting, or do we need to have it?
Under normal circumstances, if a council member asks to add an item, it will be added to the next work
So
session.
it would be for the March,
Agenda.
or the 27th of February.
Under normal circumstances, if for any reason a council member brings up an item at work session and would like to have that heard that same week, meaning on Thursday, if council's okay with that, that's all administrative, so it's council's call. But under normal circumstances, it's put on the next work session to give your colleagues time to think about, what their perspective might be, or get staff information or things like that. But that's an administrative decision for council.
Does anybody need to have more time to think about it? Because I think it's a great price, and we've been talking about it for years.
I'm okay for Thursday. The only question I would have, I don't know if you know, is how quickly, I mean, is it $29,000 every other year? Do you think it fills in that quickly? Is it going to be about that much?
$29,000 every year.
Okay. It'll last a few years, okay. I'm okay with it on Thursday.
So go ahead and add it to Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
Yes,
sorry, Mayor, I
Ms.
had one more item, and that's just, again, in terms of making sure that we have enhanced communication. I did want to ask Tara to come up and just discuss, we've been advertising this about the roundabout, and the changes that are occurring there, so just a very, very brief review of that, please.
Right, because we did some one-on-ones earlier. Tara Kivett, engineering director, and city engineer. Just first off, I want to start out, this is a pilot, 6-month pilot. We anticipate to be complete with the signage and pavement markings this Friday, February 17th. The graphic that will show you, Public Communications is working on pushing that out to the public. And ultimately, thank you, the right outside lane for traffic going from Mandalay to Coronado will now, they'll be forcing them to go to Coronado. So if beach traffic, North Beach traffic wants to leave the island, they should start out in the left or inside lane. This just will decrease the amount of conflict points and allow normal traffic that's coming from Causeway Boulevard on the inside lane to exit to Coronado easier and safer. So, any questions?
I'm not crazy about this. I'll go on the record. I know it eliminates the conflict. I think it's going to cause volume issues.
Well, we will monitor it frequently and do some modifications. In fact, we've already done some minor pavement striping modifications based on some feedback from police department. So we will, if it's not working, we'll go back to what it was or look at some other modifications.
What are the two new lights right over the Mandalay Bridge? We've got the lights at the pedestrian,
Right.
but now we have two more lights, one of which the red light doesn't work on the north side.
All right, I'll just double check with
What are
you're
those
looking
lights
at.
for?
I can't picture what you're talking about, to be honest, sorry, so I need
They're
to
two
double check.
brand-new stoplights that literally are just as you exit the Mandalay Channel Bridge.
Right, as you're heading westbound towards the
They're
beach?
probably 100 feet east of the pedestrian lights for the crosswalk.
Oh, before you get to the pedestrian lights?
Yeah. They just went in like a week and a half ago.
Are you sure they're lights? We were putting up additional signage related to this project.
Do you really want me to
No,
answer that?
I don't want you to answer that. Mayor, I will have to look into that and get back to you. Sorry, I can't picture what those are, so I'll get back to you.
There are two stoplights
Right.
that are on either side of the westbound lane.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry, I can't answer
Okay.
that. I'll get back to you.
Okay. So this is for informational purposes, we're not voting on it.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to send everybody your email on this one, not mine. Okay. Anything else? All right. You had something else you wanted to say?
I did. So I've been serving on this opioid abatement funding advisory board, and they're just asking for a designated member alternate in case I can't make it. Would any of you like to be a designated member alternate? We meet down at a Lellman office.
Where's that?
It's
Down near Pinellas Park,
Yeah.
south of Candy.
All right.
Well, you're a nurse. It'd be
I
really
know, that's
good.
fine, I can't say no.
Well, thank you. They'd but I'm not like,
You don't
I don't,
miss it
no,
that
I don't
much, right?
miss. But thank you, Lena, I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other items for future meetings? Okay. Well, we'll look forward to seeing everybody on Thursday. We are adjourned.